Chapter 9. Birds in the Bush. Rosa, having no relation that she knew of in the world, had, from the 7th year of her age, known no home but the nun's house, and no mother but Miss Twinkleton. Her remembrance of her own mother was of a pretty little creature like herself, not much older than herself it seemed to her, who had been brought home in her father's arms, drowned. The fatal accident had happened at a party of pleasure. Every fold and color in the pretty summer dress, and evening the long wet hair, with scattered petals of ruined flowers still clinging to it, as the dead young figure, in its sad, sad beauty lay upon the bed, were fixed indelibly in Rosa's recollection. So were the wild despair, and the subsequent bowed-down grief of her poor young father, who died broken-hearted on the first anniversary of that hard day. The betrothal of Rosa grew out of the soothing of his year of mental distress by his fast friend and old college companion, Drood, who likewise had been left a widower in his youth. But he, too, went the silent road into which all earthly pilgrimages merge, some sooner and some later, and thus the young couple had come to be as they were. The atmosphere of pity surrounding the little orphan girl, when she first came to Cloisterham, had never cleared away. It had taken brighter hues as she grew older, happier, prettier. Now it had been golden, now roseate, and now azure, but it had always adorned her with some soft light of its own. The general desire to console and caress her had caused her to be treated in the beginning as a child much younger than her years. The same desire had caused her to be still petted when she was a child no longer. Who should be her favorite? Who should anticipate this or that small present, or do her this or that small service? Who should take her home for the holidays? Who should write to her the oftenest when they were separated? And whom she would most rejoice to see again when they were reunited? Evening these gentle rivalries were not without their slight dashes of bitterness in the nun's house. Well for the poor nuns in their day, if they hid no harder strife under their veils and rosaries. Thus Rosa had grown to be an amiable, giddy, wilful, winning little creature, spoilt in the sense of counting upon kindness from all around her, but not in the sense of repaying it with indifference, possessing an exhaustless well of affection in her nature. Its sparkling waters had freshened and brightened the nun's house for years, and yet its depths had never yet been moved. What may betide when that came to pass? What developing changes may fall upon the heedless head and light heart? Then remained to be seen. By what means the news that there had been a quarrel between the two young men overnight, involving evening some kind of onslaught by Mr. Neville upon Edwin Drood, got into Miss Twinkleton's establishment before breakfast, it is impossible to say. Whether it was brought in by the birds of the air, or came blowing in with the very air itself, when the casement windows were set open, whether the baker brought it kneaded into the bread, or the milkman delivered it as part of the adulteration of his milk, or the housemaids, beating the dust out of their mats against the gateposts, received it in exchange deposited on the mats by the town atmosphere. Certain it is that the news permeated every gable of the old building before Miss Twinkleton was down, and that Miss Twinkleton herself received it through Mrs. Tisher, while yet in the act of dressing, or as she may have expressed the phrase to a parent or guardian of a mythological turn of sacrificing to the Graces. Miss Landless's brother had thrown a bottle at Mr. Edwin Drood. Miss Landless's brother had thrown a knife at Mr. Edwin Drood. A knife became suggestive of a fork, and Miss Landless's brother had thrown a fork at Mr. Edwin Drood. As in the governing precedents of Peter Piper, alleged to have picked the peck of pickled pepper, it was held physically desirable to have evidence of the existence of the peck of pickled pepper which Peter Piper was alleged to have picked. So, in this case, it was held psychologically important to know why Miss Landless's brother threw a bottle, knife, or fork, or bottle, knife, and fork, for the cook had been given to understand it was all three, at Mr. Edwin Drood. Well, then, Miss Landless's brother had said he admired Miss Budd. Mr. Edwin Drood had said to Miss Landless's brother that he had no business to admire Miss Budd. Miss Landless's brother had then, up this was the cook's exact information with the bottle, knife, fork, and decanter, the decanter now coolly flying at everybody's head without the least introduction, and thrown them all at Mr. Edwin Drood. Poor little Rosa put a forefinger into each of her ears when these rumors began to circulate, and retired into a corner, beseeching not to be told any more. But Miss Landless, begging permission of Miss Twinkleton to go and speak with her brother, and pretty plainly showing that she would take it if it were not given, struck out the more definite course of going to Mr. Crisparkle's for accurate intelligence. When she came back, being first closeted with Miss Twinkleton, in order that anything objectionable in her tidings may be retained by that discreet filter, she imparted to Rosa only what had taken place, dwelling with a flushed cheek on the provocation her brother had received, but almost limiting it to that last gross affront as crowning some other words between them, and, out of consideration for her new friend, passing lightly over the fact that the other words had originated in her lover's taking things in general so very easily. To Rosa direct, she brought a petition from her brother that she would forgive him, and having delivered it with sisterly earnestness, made an end of the subject. It was reserved for Miss Twinkleton to tone down the public mind of the nun's house. That lady, therefore, entering in a stately manner what plebeians may have called the schoolroom, but what, in the patrician language of the head of the nun's house, was euphuistically, not to say roundaboutedly, denominated the apartment allotted to study, and saying with a forensic air, "Ladies." All rose. Mrs. Tisher at the same time grouped herself behind her chief, as representing Queen Elizabeth's first historical female friend at Tilbury Fort. Miss Twinkleton then proceeded to remark that rumor, ladies, had been represented by the Bard of Avon. Needless were it to mention the immortal Shakespeare, also called the swan of his native river, not improbably with some reference to the ancient superstition that that bird of graceful plumage Miss Jennings will please stand upright sang sweetly on the approach of death, for which we have no ornithological authority. Rumor, ladies, had been represented by that bard, who drew the celebrated Jew as painted full of tongues. Rumor in Cloisterham. Miss Ferdinand will honor me with her attention was no exception to the great limner's portrait of rumor elsewhere. A slight fracas between two young gentlemen occurring last night within 100 miles of these peaceful walls, Miss Ferdinand, being apparently incorrigible, will have the kindness to write out this evening, in the original language, the first 4 fables of our vivacious neighbor, Monsieur La Fontaine, had been very grossly exaggerated by rumor's voice. In the first, alarm and anxiety arising from our sympathy with a sweet young friend, not wholly to be dissociated from one of the gladiators in the bloodless arena in question. The impropriety of Miss Reynolds's appearing to stab herself in the hand with a pin is far too obvious, and too glaringly unladylike, to be pointed out. We descended from our maiden elevation to discuss this uncongenial and this unfit theme, responsible inquiries having assured us that it was but one of those airy nothings, pointed at by the poet whose name and date of birth Miss Giggles will supply within half an hour. We would now discard the subject, and concentrate our minds upon the grateful labors of the day. But the subject so survived all day, nevertheless, that Miss Ferdinand got into new trouble by surreptitiously clapping on a paper moustache at dinner time, and going through the motions of aiming a water bottle at Miss Giggles, who drew a tablespoon in defense. Now, Rosa thought of this unlucky quarrel a great deal, and thought of it with an uncomfortable feeling that she was involved in it, as cause, or consequence, or what not, through being in a false position altogether as to her marriage engagement. Never free from such uneasiness, when she was with her affianced husband, it was not likely that she would be free from it when they were apart. Today, too, she was cast in upon herself, and deprived of the relief of talking freely with her new friend because the quarrel had been with Helena's brother, and Helena undisguisedly avoided the subject as a delicate and difficult one to herself. At this critical time, of all times, Rosa's guardian was announced as having come to see her. Mr. Grewgious had been well selected for his trust, as a man of incorruptible integrity, but certainly for no other appropriate quality discernible on the surface. He was an arid, sandy man who, if he had been put into a grinding mill, looked as if he would have ground immediately into high-dried snuff. He had a scanty flat crop of hair, in color and consistency like some very mangy yellow fur tippet. It was so unlike hair that it must have been a wig, but for the stupendous improbability of anybody's voluntarily sporting such a head. The little play of feature that his face presented was cut deep into it, in a few hard curves that made it more like work, and he had certain notches in his forehead, which looked as though nature had been about to touch them into sensibility or refinement, when she had impatiently thrown away the chisel, and said, I really cannot be worried to finish off this man, let him go as he is, with too great length of throat at his upper end, and too much ankle bone and heel at his lower, with an awkward and hesitating manner, with a shambling walk, and with what is called a near sight, which perhaps prevented his observing how much white cotton stocking he displayed to the public eye, in contrast with his black suit. Mr. Grewgious still had some strange capacity in him of making, on the whole, an agreeable impression. Mr. Grewgious was discovered by his ward, much discomfited by being in Miss Twinkleton's company in Miss Twinkleton's own sacred room. Dim forebodings of being examined in something, and not coming well out of it, seemed to oppress the poor gentleman when found in these circumstances. My dear, how do you do? I am glad to see you. My dear, how much improved you are. Permit me to hand you a chair, my dear. Miss Twinkleton rose at her little writing table, saying, with general sweetness, as to the polite universe, Will you permit me to retire? By no means, madam, on my account. I beg that you will not move. I must entreat permission to move, returned Miss Twinkleton, repeating the word with a charming grace, but I will not withdraw, since you are so obliging. If I wheel my desk to this corner window, shall I be in the way? Madam, in the way. You are very kind. Rosa, my dear, you will be under no restraint, I am sure. Here Mr. Grewgious, left by the fire with Rosa, said again, My dear, how do you do? I am glad to see you, my dear, and having waited for her to sit down, sat down himself. My visits, said Mr. Grewgious, are like those of the angels, not that I compare myself to an angel. No, sir, said Rosa. Not by any means, assented Mr. Grewgious. I merely refer to my visits, which are few and far between. The angels are, we know very well, upstairs. Miss Twinkleton looked round with a kind of stiff stare. I refer, my dear, said Mr. Grewgious, laying his hand on Rosa's, as the possibility thrilled through his frame of his otherwise seeming to take the awful liberty of calling Miss Twinkleton my dear. I refer to the other young ladies. Miss Twinkleton resumed her writing. Mr. Grewgious, with a sense of not having managed his opening point quite as neatly as he may have desired, smoothed his head from back to front as if he had just dived, and were pressing the water out. This smoothing action, however superfluous, was habitual with him, and took a pocket-book from his coat-pocket, and a stump of black lead pencil from his waistcoat-pocket. I made, he said, turning the leaves, I made a guiding memorandum or so, as I usually do, for I have no conversational powers whatever, to which I will, with your permission, my dear, refer. Well and happy, truly, you are well and happy, my dear, you look so. Yes, truly, sir, answered Rosa, for which, said Mr. Grewgious, with a bend of his head towards the corner window, our warmest acknowledgments are due, and I am sure are rendered, to the maternal kindness and the constant care and consideration of the lady whom I have now the honor to see before me. This point, again, made but a lame departure from Mr. Grewgious, and never got to its destination, for Miss Twinkleton, feeling that the courtesies required her to be by this time quite outside the conversation, was biting the end of her pen, and looking upward, as waiting for the descent of an idea from any member of the celestial nine who may have one to spare. Mr. Grewgious smoothed his smooth head again, and then made another reference to his pocket-book, lining out, well and happy, as disposed of. Pounds, shillings, and pence is my next note. A dry subject for a young lady, but an important subject too. Life is pounds, shillings, and pence. Death is a sudden recollection of the death of her two parents seemed to stop him, and he said in a softer tone, and evidently inserting the negative as an afterthought, Death is not pounds, shillings, and pence. His voice was as hard and dry as himself, and fancy may have ground it straight, like himself, into high-dried snuff. And yet, Through the very limited means of expression that he possessed, he seemed to express kindness. If nature had but finished him off, kindness may have been recognizable in his face at this moment, but if the notches in his forehead wouldn't fuse together, and if his face would work and couldn't play, what could he do, poor man? Pounds, shillings, and pence. You find your allowance always sufficient for your wants, my dear. Rosa wanted for nothing, and therefore it was ample. And you are not in debt? Rosa laughed at the idea of being in debt. It seemed, to her inexperience, a comical vagary of the imagination. Mr. Grewgious stretched his near sight to be sure that this was her view of the case. Ah, he said as comment, with a furtive glance towards Miss Twinkleton, and lining out pounds, shillings, and pence. I spoke of having got among the angels. So I did. Rosa felt what his next memorandum would prove to be, and was blushing and folding a crease in her dress with one embarrassed hand long before he found it. Marriage. Hem. Mr. Grewgious carried his smoothing hand down over his eyes and nose and evening chin, before drawing his chair a little nearer and speaking a little more confidentially. I now touch, my dear, upon the point that is the direct cause of my troubling you with the present visit. Otherwise, being a particularly angular man, I should not have intruded here. I am the last man to intrude into a sphere for which I am so entirely unfitted. I feel, on these premises, as if I was a bear with the cramp in a youthful cotilon. His ungainliness gave him enough of the air of his simile to set Rosa off laughing heartily. It strikes you in the same light, said Mr. Grewgious, with perfect calmness. Just so. To return to my memorandum, Mr. Edwin has been to and fro here, as was arranged. You have mentioned that, in your quarterly letters to me, and you like him, and he likes you. I like him very much, sir, rejoined Rosa. So I said, my dear, returned her guardian, for whose ear the timid emphasis was much too fine. Good. And you correspond. We write to one another, said Rosa, pouting, as she recalled their epistolary differences. Such is the meaning that I attach to the word correspond in this application, my dear, said Mr. Grewgious. Good. All goes well, time works on, and at this next Christmas time it will become necessary, as a matter of form, to give the exemplary lady in the corner window, to whom we are so much indebted, business notice of your departure in the ensuing half year. Your relations with her are far more than business relations, no doubt, but a residue of business remains in them, and business is business ever. I am a particularly angular man, proceeded Mr. Grewgious, as if it suddenly occurred to him to mention it, and I am not used to give anything away. If, for these two reasons, some competent proxy would give you away, I should take it very kindly. Rosa intimated, with her eyes on the ground, that she thought a substitute may be found, if required. Surely, surely, said Mr. Grewgious. For instance, the gentleman who teaches dancing here, he would know how to do it with graceful propriety. He would advance and retire in a manner satisfactory to the feelings of the officiating clergyman and of yourself, and the bridegroom, and all parties concerned. I am a particularly angular man, said Mr. Grewgious, as if he had made up his mind to screw it out at last, and should only blunder. Rosa sat still and silent. Perhaps her mind had not got quite so far as the ceremony yet, but was lagging on the way there. Memorandum, will. Now, my dear, said Mr. Grewgious, referring to his notes, disposing of marriage, with his pencil, and taking a paper from his pocket. Although I have before possessed you with the contents of your father's will, I think it right at this time to leave a certified copy of it in your hands. And although Mr. Edwin is also aware of its contents, I think it right at this time likewise to place a certified copy of it in Mr. Jasper's hand, not in his own, asked Rosa, looking up quickly. Cannot the copy go to Eddie himself? Why, yes, my dear, if you particularly wish it, but I spoke of Mr. Jasper as being his trustee. I do particularly wish it, if you please, said Rosa, hurriedly and earnestly. I don't like Mr. Jasper to come between us in any way. It is natural, I suppose, said Mr. Grewgious, that your young husband should be all in all. Yes, you observe that I say, I suppose. The fact is, I am a particularly unnatural man, and I don't know from my own knowledge. Rosa looked at him with some wonder. I mean, he explained, that young ways were never my ways. I was the only offspring of parents far advanced in life, and I half believe I was born advanced in life myself. No personality is intended towards the name you will so soon change. When I remark that while the general growth of people seem to have come into existence, buds, I seem to have come into existence a chip. I was a chip, and a very dry one, when I first became aware of myself. Respecting the other certified copy, your wish shall be complied with. Respecting your inheritance, I think you know all. It is an annuity of £250. The savings upon that annuity, and some other items to your credit, all duly carried to account, with vouchers, will place you in possession of a lump sum of money rather exceeding £1,700. I am empowered to advance the cost of your preparations for your marriage out of that fund. All is told. Will you please tell me, said Rosa, taking the paper with a prettily knitted brow, but not opening it, whether I am right in what I am going to say? I can understand what you tell me, so very much better than what I read in law writings. My poor papa and Eddie's father made their agreement together as very dear and firm and fast friends, in order that we, too, may be very dear and firm and fast friends after them. Just so, for the lasting good of both of us, and the lasting happiness of both of us. Just so, that we may be to one another evening much more than they had been to one another. Just so, it was not bound upon Eddie, and it was not bound upon me, by any forfeit, in case. Don't be agitated, my dear, in the case that it brings tears into your affectionate eyes evening to picture to yourself. In the case of your not marrying one another, no forfeiture on either side. You would then have been my ward until you were of age. No worse would have befallen you. Bad enough, perhaps. And Eddie, he would have come into his partnership derived from his father, and into its arrears to his credit if any, on attaining his majority, just as now. Rosa, with her perplexed face and knitted brow, bit the corner of her attested copy, as she sat with her head on one side, looking abstractedly on the floor, and smoothing it with her foot. In short, said Mr. Grewgious, this betrothal is a wish, a sentiment, a friendly project, tenderly expressed on both sides. That it was strongly felt, and that there was a lively hope that it would prosper, there can be no doubt. When you were both children, you began to be accustomed to it, and it has prospered. But circumstances alter cases, and I made this visit today, partly, truly principally, to discharge myself of the duty of telling you, my dear, that two young people can only be betrothed in marriage except as a matter of convenience, and there for mockery and misery of their own free will, their own attachment, and their own assurance it may or it may not prove a mistaken one, but we must take our chance of that they are suited to each other, and will make each other happy. Is it to be supposed, for example, that if either of your fathers were living now, and had any mistrust on that subject, his mind would not be changed by the change of circumstances involved in the change of your years? Untenable, unreasonable, inconclusive, and preposterous. Mr. Grewgious said all this as if he were reading it aloud, or, still more, as if he were repeating a lesson. So expressionless of any approach to spontaneity were his face and manner. I have now, my dear, he added, blurring out, will, with his pencil, discharged myself of what is doubtless a formal duty in this case, but still a duty in such a case. Memorandum, wishes. My dear, is there any wish of yours that I can further? Rosa shook her head, with an almost plaintive air of hesitation and want of help. Is there any instruction that I can take from you with reference to your affairs? I should like to settle them with Eddie first, if you please, said Rosa, plaiting the crease in her dress. Surely, returned Mr. Grewgious, you two should be of one mind in all things. Is the young gentleman expected shortly? He has gone away only this morning. He will be back at Christmas. Nothing could happen better. You will, on his return at Christmas, arrange all matters of detail with him. You will then communicate with me, and I will discharge myself as a mere business acquaintance of my business responsibilities towards the accomplished lady in the corner window. They will accrue at that season. Blurring pencil once again. Memorandum, leave. Yes, I will now, my dear, take my leave. Could I, said Rosa, rising as he jerked out of his chair in his ungainly way, could I ask you most kindly to come to me at Christmas if I had anything particular to say to you? Why, certainly, certainly, he rejoined, apparently, if such a word can be used of one who had no apparent lights or shadows about him, complemented by the question. As a particularly angular man, I do not fit smoothly into the social circle, and consequently I have no other engagement at Christmas time than to partake, on the 25th, of a boiled turkey and celery sauce with a particularly angular clerk I have the good fortune to possess, whose father, being a Norfolk farmer, sends him up the turkey as a present to me, from the neighborhood of Norwich. I should be quite proud of your wishing to see me, my dear. As a professional receiver of rents, so very few people do wish to see me, that the novelty would be bracing. For his ready acquiescence, the grateful Rosa put her hands upon his shoulders, stood on tiptoe, and instantly kissed him. Lord bless me, cried Mr. Grewgious. Thank you, my dear. The honor is almost equal to the pleasure. Miss Twinkleton, madam, I have had a most satisfactory conversation with my ward, and I will now release you from the encumbrance of my presence. No, sir, rejoined Miss Twinkleton, rising with a gracious condescension. Say not encumbrance. Not so, by any means. I cannot permit you to say so. Thank you, madam. I have read in the newspapers, said Mr. Grewgious, stammering a little, that when a distinguished visitor, not that I am one, far from it, goes to a school, not that this is one, far from it, he asks for a holiday or some sort of grace. It being now the afternoon in a college, of which you are the eminent head, the young ladies may gain nothing, except in name, by having the rest of the day allowed them. But if there is any young lady at all under a cloud, may I solicit? Ah, Mr. Grewgious, cried Miss Twinkleton, with a chastely rallying forefinger. Oh, you gentlemen, fie for shame, that you are so hard upon us poor maligned disciplinarians of our sex, for your sakes. But as Miss Ferdinand is at present weighed down by an incubus, Miss Twinkleton may have said a pen and incubus of writing out Monsieur Lafontaine. Go to her, Rosa, my dear, and tell her the penalty is remitted, in deference to the intercession of your guardian, Mr. Grewgious. Miss Twinkleton here achieved a curtsy, suggestive of marvels happening to her respected legs, and which she came out of nobly, 3 yards behind her starting point. As he held it incumbent upon him to call on Mr. Jasper before leaving Cloisterham, Mr. Grewgious went to the gatehouse and climbed its postern stair. But Mr. Jasper's door being closed, and presenting on a slip of paper the word cathedral, the fact of its being service time was borne into the mind of Mr. Grewgious. So he descended the stair again, and, crossing the close, paused at the great western folding door of the cathedral, which stood open on the fine and bright, though short-lived, afternoon, for the airing of the place. Dear me, said Mr. Grewgious, peeping in, it's like looking down the throat of old time. Old time heaved a mouldy sigh from tomb and arch and vault, and gloomy shadows began to deepen in corners, and damps began to rise from green patches of stone, and jewels, cast upon the pavement of the nave from stained glass by the declining sun, began to perish. Within the grille gate of the chancel, up the steps surmounted loomingly by the fast darkening organ, white robes could be dimly seen, and one feeble voice, rising and falling in a cracked, monotonous mutter, could at intervals be faintly heard. In the free outer air, the river, the green pastures, and the brown arable lands, the teeming hills and dales, were reddened by the sunset, while the distant little windows and windmills and farm homesteads shone, patches of bright beaten gold. In the cathedral, all became gray, murky, and sepulchral, and the cracked, monotonous mutter went on like a dying voice, until the organ and the choir burst forth, and drowned it in a sea of music. Then the sea fell, and the dying voice made another feeble effort, and then the sea rose high, and beat its life out, and lashed the roof, and surged among the arches, and pierced the heights of the great tower, and then the sea was dry, and all was still. Mr. Grewgious had by that time walked to the chancel steps, where he met the living waters coming out. Nothing is the matter. Thus Jasper accosted him rather quickly. You have not been sent for. Not at all, not at all. I came down of my own accord. I have been to my pretty wards, and am now homeward bound again. You found her thriving, blooming truly, most blooming. I merely came to tell her, seriously, what a betrothal by deceased parents is. And what is it according to your judgment? Mr. Grewgious noticed the whiteness of the lips that asked the question, and put it down to the chilling account of the cathedral. I merely came to tell her that it could not be considered binding, against any such reason for its dissolution as a want of affection, or want of disposition to carry it into effect, on the side of either party. May I ask, had you any especial reason for telling her that? Mr. Grewgious answered somewhat sharply, the especial reason of doing my duty, sir. Simply that. Then he added, Come, Mr. Jasper, I know your affection for your nephew, and that you are quick to feel on his behalf. I assure you that this implies not the least doubt of, or disrespect to, your nephew. You could not, returned Jasper, with a friendly pressure of his arm, as they walked on side by side, speak more handsomely. Mr. Grewgious pulled off his hat to smooth his head, and having smoothed it, nodded it contentedly, and put his hat on again. I will wager, said Jasper, smiling. His lips were still so white that he was conscious of it, and bit and moistened them while speaking. I will wager that she hinted no wish to be released from Ned. And you will win your wager, if you do, retorted Mr. Grewgious. We should allow some margin for little maidenly delicacies in a young motherless creature. Under such circumstances, I suppose, it is not in my line. What do you think? There can be no doubt of it. I am glad you say so, because, proceeded Mr. Grewgious, who had all this time very knowingly felt his way round to action on his remembrance of what she had said of Jasper himself, because she seems to have some little delicate instinct that all preliminary arrangements had best be made between Mr. Edwin Drood and herself. Don't you see? She don't want us, don't you know? Jasper touched himself on the breast, and said, somewhat indistinctly, You mean me. Mr. Grewgious touched himself on the breast, and said, I mean us. Therefore, let them have their little discussions and counsels together, when Mr. Edwin Drood comes back here at Christmas, and then you and I will step in and put the final touches to the business. So, you settled with her that you would come back at Christmas, observed Jasper. I see, Mr. Grewgious, as you quite fairly said just now, there is such an exceptional attachment between my nephew and me, that I am more sensitive for the dear, fortunate, happy fellow than for myself. But it is only right that the young lady should be considered, as you have pointed out, and that I should accept my cue from you. I accept it. I understand that at Christmas they will complete their preparations for May, and that their marriage will be put in final train by themselves, and that nothing will remain for us but to put ourselves in train also, and have everything ready for our formal release from our trusts, on Edwin's birthday. That is my understanding, assented Mr. Grewgious, as they shook hands to part. God bless them both. God save them both, cried Jasper. I said, bless them, remarked the former, looking back over his shoulder. I said, save them, returned the latter. Chapter 10. Smoothing the Way. It has been often enough remarked that women have a curious power of divining the characters of men, which would seem to be innate and instinctive, seeing that it is arrived at through no patient process of reasoning, that it can give no satisfactory or sufficient account of itself, and that it pronounces in the most confident manner even against accumulated observation on the part of the other sex. But it has not been quite so often remarked that this power fallible, like every other human attribute, is for the most part absolutely incapable of self-revision, and that when it has delivered an adverse opinion which by all human lights is subsequently proved to have failed, it is undistinguishable from prejudice, in respect of its determination not to be corrected. No, the very possibility of contradiction or disproof, however remote, communicates to this feminine judgment from the first, in 9 cases out of 10, the weakness attendant on the testimony of an interested witness. So personally and strongly does the fair diviner connect herself with her divination. Now, don't you think, Ma dear, said the minor canon to his mother one day as she sat at her knitting in his little book-room, that you are rather hard on Mr. Neville? No, I do not, Sept, returned the old lady. Let us discuss it, Ma. I have no objection to discuss it, Sept. I trust, my dear, I am always open to discussion. There was a vibration in the old lady's cap, as though she internally added, and I should like to see the discussion that would change my mind. Very good, Ma, said her conciliatory son. There is nothing like being open to discussion. I hope not, my dear, returned the old lady, evidently shut to it. Well, Mr. Neville, on that unfortunate occasion, commits himself under provocation, and under mulled wine, added the old lady. I must admit the wine, though I believe the 2 young men were much alike in that regard. I don't, said the old lady. Why not, Ma? Because I don't, said the old lady. Still, I am quite open to discussion. But, my dear Ma, I cannot see how we are to discuss, if you take that line. Blame Mr. Neville for it, Sept, and not me, said the old lady, with stately severity. My dear Ma, why Mr. Neville? Because, said Mrs. Crisparkle, retiring on first principles, he came home intoxicated, and did great discredit to this house, and showed great disrespect to this family. That is not to be denied, Ma. He was then, and he is now, very sorry for it. But for Mr. Jasper's well-bred consideration in coming up to me next day after service in the nave itself, with his gown still on, and expressing his hope that I had not been greatly alarmed or had my rest violently broken, I believe I may never have heard of that disgraceful transaction, said the old lady. To be candid, Ma, I think I should have kept it from you if I could, though I had not decidedly made up my mind. I was following Jasper out, to confer with him on the subject, and to consider the expediency of his and my jointly hushing the thing up on all accounts, when I found him speaking to you. Then it was too late, truly, Sept. He was still as pale as gentlemanly ashes at what had taken place in his rooms overnight. If I had kept it from you, Ma, you may be sure it would have been for your peace and quiet, and for the good of the young men, and in my best discharge of my duty according to my lights. The old lady immediately walked across the room and kissed him, saying, Of course, my dear Sept, I am sure of that. However, it became the town talk, said Mr. Crisparkle, rubbing his ear, as his mother resumed her seat and her knitting, and passed out of my power. And I said then, Sept, returned the old lady, that I thought ill of Mr. Neville, and I say now, that I think ill of Mr. Neville, and I said then, and I say now, that I hope Mr. Neville may come to good, but I don't believe he will. Here the cap vibrated again considerably. I am sorry to hear you say so, Ma. I am sorry to say so, my dear, interposed the old lady, knitting on firmly, but I can't help it. For, pursued the minor canon, it is undeniable that Mr. Neville is exceedingly industrious and attentive, and that he improves apace, and that he has, I hope I may say, an attachment to me. There is no merit in the last article, my dear, said the old lady, quickly, and if he says there is, I think the worse of him for the boast. But, my dear Ma, he never said there was. Perhaps not, returned the old lady. Still, I don't see that it greatly signifies. There was no impatience in the pleasant look with which Mr. Crisparkle contemplated the pretty old piece of china as it knitted, but there was, certainly, a humorous sense of its not being a piece of china to argue with very closely. Besides, Sept, ask yourself what he would be without his sister. You know what an influence she has over him, you know what a capacity she has, you know that whatever he reads with you, he reads with her. Give her her fair share of your praise. "And how much do you leave for him?" At these words Mr. Crisparkle fell into a little reverie, in which he thought of several things. He thought of the times he had seen the brother and sister together in deep converse over one of his own old college books, now, in the rimy mornings, when he made those sharpening pilgrimages to Cloister Amweir, now, in the somber evenings, when he faced the wind at sunset, having climbed his favorite outlook, a beetling fragment of monastery ruin, and the two studious figures passed below him along the margin of the river, in which the town fires and lights already shone, making the landscape bleaker. He thought how the consciousness had stolen upon him that in teaching one he was teaching two, and how he had almost insensibly adapted his explanations to both minds, that with which his own was daily in contact, and that which he only approached through it. He thought of the gossip that had reached him from the nun's house, to the effect that Helena, whom he had mistrusted as so proud and fierce, submitted herself to the fairy bride as he called her, and learnt from her what she knew. He thought of the picturesque alliance between those two, externally so very different. He thought, perhaps most of all, could it be, that these things were yet but so many weeks old and had become an integral part of his life, as, whenever the Reverend Septimus fell a-musing, his good mother took it to be an infallible sign that he wanted support. The blooming old lady made all haste to the dining-room closet, to produce from it the support embodied in a glass of Constantia and a homemade biscuit. It was a most wonderful closet, worthy of Cloisterham and of Minor Canon Corner. Above it, a portrait of Handel in a flowing wig beamed down at the spectator, with a knowing air of being up to the contents of the closet, and a musical air of intending to combine all its harmonies in one delicious fugue. No common closet with a vulgar door on hinges, openable all at once, and leaving nothing to be disclosed by degrees. This rare closet had a lock in the mid-air, where two perpendicular slides met, the one falling down and the other pushing up. The upper slide, on being pulled down leaving the lower a double mystery, revealed deep shelves of pickle jars, jam pots, tin canisters, spice boxes, and agreeably outlandish vessels of blue and white, the luscious lodgings of preserved tamarinds and ginger. Every benevolent inhabitant of this retreat had his name inscribed upon his stomach. The pickles, in a uniform of rich brown double-breasted buttoned coat, and yellow or somber drab continuations, announced their portly forms in printed capitals as walnut, gherkin, onion, cabbage, cauliflower, mixed, and other members of that noble family. The jams, as being of a less masculine temperament and as wearing curl-papers, announced themselves in feminine calligraphy like a soft whisper to be raspberry, gooseberry, apricot, plum, damson, apple, and peach. The scene closing on these charmers and the lower slide ascending, oranges were revealed, attended by a mighty Japan sugar box to temper their acerbity if unripe. Homemade biscuits waited at the court of these powers, accompanied by a goodly fragment of plum cake, and various slender ladies' fingers, to be dipped into sweet wine and kissed. Lowest of all, a compact leaden vault enshrined the sweet wine and a stock of cordials, from where issued whispers of Seville orange, lemon, almond, and caraway seed. There was a crowning air upon this closet of closets, of having been for ages hummed through by the cathedral bell and organ, until those venerable bees had made sublimated honey of everything in store, and it was always observed that every dipper among the shelves deep, as has been noticed, and swallowing up head, shoulders, and elbows came forth again mellow-faced, and seeming to have undergone a saccharine transfiguration. The Reverend Septimus yielded himself up quite as willing a victim to a nauseous medicinal herb closet, also presided over by the China shepherdess, as to this glorious cupboard. To what amazing infusions of gentian, peppermint, gilliflower, sage, parsley, thyme, rue, rosemary, and dandelion did his courageous stomach submit itself? In what wonderful wrappers, enclosing layers of dried leaves, would he swat his rosy and contented face, if his mother suspected him of a toothache? What botanical blotches would he cheerfully stick upon his cheek or forehead, if the dear old lady convicted him of an imperceptible pimple there? Into this herbaceous penitentiary, situated on an upper staircase landing, a low and narrow whitewashed cell, where bunches of dried leaves hung from rusty hooks in the ceiling, and were spread out upon shelves, in company with portentous bottles, would the Reverend Septimus submissively be led, like the highly popular lamb who has so long and unresistingly been led to the slaughter, and there would he, unlike that lamb, bore nobody but himself, not even doing that much, so that the old lady were busy and pleased, he would quietly swallow what was given him, merely taking a corrective dip of hands and face into the great bowl of dried rose leaves, and into the other great bowl of dried lavender, and then would go out, as confident in the sweetening powers of cloisterham were and a wholesome mind, as Lady Macbeth was hopeless of those of all the seas that roll. In the present instance the good minor canon took his glass of Constantia with an excellent grace, and, so supported to his mother's satisfaction, applied himself to the remaining duties of the day. In their orderly and punctual progress they brought round vesper service and twilight. The cathedral being very cold, he set off for a brisk trot after service, the trot to end in a charge at his favourite fragment of ruin, which was to be carried by storm, without a pause for breath. He carried it in a masterly manner, and, not breathed evening then, stood looking down upon the river. The river at Cloisterham is sufficiently near the sea to throw up oftentimes a quantity of seaweed. An unusual quantity had come in with the last tide, and this, and the confusion of the water, and the restless dipping and flapping of the noisy gulls, and an angry light out seaward beyond the brown-sailed barges that were turning black, foreshadowed a stormy night. In his mind he was contrasting the wild and noisy sea with the quiet harbour of Minor Canon Corner, when Helena and Neville Landless passed below him. He had had the two together in his thoughts all day, and at once climbed down to speak to them together. The footing was rough in an uncertain light for any tread save that of a good climber, but the minor canon was as good a climber as most men, and stood beside them before many good climbers would have been halfway down. A wild evening, Miss Landless. Do you not find your usual walk with your brother too exposed and cold for the time of year? Or at all events, when the sun is down and the weather is driving in from the sea? Helena thought not. It was their favorite walk. It was very retired. It is very retired, assented Mr. Crisparkle, laying hold of his opportunity immediately, and walking on with them. It is a place of all others where one can speak without interruption, as I wish to do. Mr. Neville, I believe you tell your sister everything that passes between us. Everything, sir. Consequently, said Mr. Crisparkle, your sister is aware that I have repeatedly urged you to make some kind of apology for that unfortunate occurrence which befell on the night of your arrival here. In saying it he looked to her, and not to him, therefore it was she, and not he, who replied. Yes, I call it unfortunate, Miss Helena, resumed Mr. Crisparkle, forasmuch as it certainly has engendered a prejudice against Neville. There is a notion about that he is a dangerously passionate fellow of an uncontrollable and furious temper. He is really avoided as such. I have no doubt he is, poor fellow, said Helena, with a look of proud compassion at her brother, expressing a deep sense of his being ungenerously treated. I should be quite sure of it, from your saying so, but what you tell me is confirmed by suppressed hints and references that I meet with every day. Now, Mr. Crisparkle again resumed, in a tone of mild though firm persuasion, is not this to be regretted, and ought it not to be amended? These are early days of Neville's in Cloisterham, and I have no fear of his outliving such a prejudice, and proving himself to have been misunderstood. But how much wiser to take action at once, than to trust till uncertain time. Besides, apart from its being politic, it is right, for there can be no question that Neville was wrong. He was provoked, Helena submitted. He was the assailant, Mr. Crisparkle submitted. They walked on in silence, until Helena raised her eyes to the minor canon's face, and said, almost reproachfully, "Oh, Mr. Crisparkle, would you have Neville throw himself at young Drood's feet, or at Mr. Jasper's, who maligns him every day? In your heart you cannot mean it. From your heart you could not do it, if his case were yours." "I have represented to Mr. Crisparkle, Helena," said Neville, with a glance of deference towards his tutor, "that if I could do it from my heart, I would." But I cannot, and I revolt from the pretense. You forget, however, that to put the case to Mr. Crisparkle as his own, is to suppose to have done what I did. I ask his pardon, said Helena. You see, remarked Mr. Crisparkle, again laying hold of his opportunity, though with a moderate and delicate touch, you both instinctively acknowledge that Neville did wrong. Then why stop short, and not otherwise acknowledge it? Is there no difference, asked Helena, with a little faltering in her manner, between submission to a generous spirit and submission to a base or trivial one? Before the worthy minor canon was quite ready with his argument in reference to this nice distinction, Neville struck in. Help me to clear myself with Mr. Crisparkle, Helena. Help me to convince him that I cannot be the first to make concessions without mockery and falsehood. My nature must be changed before I can do so, and it is not changed. I am sensible of inexpressible affront, and deliberate aggravation of inexpressible affront, and I am angry. The plain truth is, I am still as angry when I recall that night as I was that night. Neville, hinted the minor canon, with a steady countenance, you have repeated that former action of your hands, which I so much dislike. I am sorry for it, sir, but it was involuntary. I confessed that I was still as angry. And I confess, said Mr. Crisparkle, that I hoped for better things. I am sorry to disappoint you, sir, but it would be far worse to deceive you, and I should deceive you grossly if I pretended that you had softened me in this respect. The time may come when your powerful influence will do evening that with the difficult pupil whose antecedents you know, but it has not come yet. Is this so? And in spite of my struggles against myself, Helena, she, whose dark eyes were watching the effect of what he said on Mr. Crisparkle's face, replied to Mr. Crisparkle, not to him. It is so. After a short pause, she answered the slightest look of inquiry conceivable in her brother's eyes, with as slight an affirmative bend of her own head, and he went on. I have never yet had the courage to say to you, sir, what in full openness I ought to have said when you first talked with me on the subject. It is not easy to say, and I have been withheld by a fear of its seeming ridiculous, which is very strong upon me down to this last moment, and may, but for my sister, prevent my being quite open with you evening now. I admire Miss Budd, sir, so very much, that I cannot bear her being treated with conceit or indifference. An evening if I did not feel that I had an injury against young Drood on my own account, I should feel that I had an injury against him on hers. Mr. Crisparkle, in utter amazement, looked at Helena for corroboration, and met in her expressive face full corroboration and a plea for advice. The young lady of whom you speak is, as you know, Mr. Neville, shortly to be married, said Mr. Crisparkle gravely. Therefore your admiration, if it be of that special nature which you seem to indicate, is outrageously misplaced. Moreover, it is monstrous that you should take upon yourself to be the young lady's champion against her chosen husband. Besides, you have seen them only once. The young lady has become your sister's friend, and I wonder that your sister, evening on her behalf, has not checked you in this irrational and culpable fancy. She has tried, sir, but uselessly. Husband or no husband, that fellow is incapable of the feeling with which I am inspired towards the beautiful young creature whom he treats like a doll. I say he is as incapable of it as he is unworthy of her. I say she is sacrificed in being bestowed upon him. I say that I love her, and despise and hate him. This with a face so flushed, and a gesture so violent, that his sister crossed to his side and caught his arm, remonstrating, Neville, Neville. Thus recalled to himself, he quickly became sensible of having lost the guard he had set upon his passionate tendency, and covered his face with his hand, as one repentant and wretched. Mr. Crisparkle, watching him attentively, and at the same time meditating how to proceed, walked on for some paces in silence. Then he spoke. Mr. Neville, Mr. Neville, I am sorely grieved to see in you more traces of a character as sullen, angry, and wild as the night now closing in. They are of too serious an aspect to leave me the resource of treating the infatuation you have disclosed, as undeserving serious consideration. I give it very serious consideration, and I speak to you accordingly. This feud between you and young Drood must not go on. I cannot permit it to go on any longer, knowing what I now know from you, and you living under my roof. Whatever prejudiced and unauthorized constructions your blind and envious wrath may put upon his character, it is a frank, good-natured character. I know I can trust to it for that. Now, pray observe what I am about to say. On reflection, and on your sister's representation, I am willing to admit that, in making peace with young Drood, you have a right to be met halfway. I will engage that you shall be, an evening that young Drood shall make the first advance. This condition fulfilled, you will pledge me the honor of a Christian gentleman that the quarrel is forever at an end on your side. What may be in your heart when you give him your hand can only be known to the searcher of all hearts, but it will never go well with you, if there be any treachery there. So far, as to that. Next, as to what I must again speak of as your infatuation, I understand it to have been confided to me, and to be known to no other person save your sister and yourself. Do I understand aright? Helena answered in a low voice, "It is only known to us three who are here together. It is not at all known to the young lady, your friend? On my soul, no. I require you, then, to give me your similar and solemn pledge, Mr. Neville, that it shall remain the secret it is, and that you will take no other action whatever upon it than endeavoring and that most earnestly to erase it from your mind. I will not tell you that it will soon pass. I will not tell you that it is the fancy of the moment. I will not tell you that such caprices have their rise and fall among the young and ardent every hour. I will leave you undisturbed in the belief that it has few parallels or none, that it will abide with you a long time, and that it will be very difficult to conquer. So much the more weight shall I attach to the pledge I require from you, when it is unreservedly given." The young man twice or thrice essayed to speak, but failed. "Let me leave you with your sister, whom it is time you took home," said Mr. Crisparkle. "You will find me alone in my room by and by. Pray do not leave us yet," Helena implored him. "Another minute." "I should not," said Neville, pressing his hand upon his face, "have needed so much as another minute, if you had been less patient with me, Mr. Crisparkle, less considerate of me, and less unpretendingly good and true. Oh, if in my childhood I had known such a guide!" "Follow your guide now, Neville," murmured Helena, "and follow him to heaven." There was that in her tone which broke the good minor canon's voice, or it would have repudiated her exultation of him. As it was, he laid a finger on his lips and looked towards her brother. "To say that I give both pledges, Mr. Crisparkle, out of my innermost heart, and to say that there is no treachery in it, is to say nothing." Thus Neville, greatly moved. "I beg your forgiveness for my miserable lapse into a burst of passion. Not mine, Neville, not mine. You know with whom forgiveness lies as the highest attribute conceivable. Miss Helena, you and your brother are twin children. You came into this world with the same dispositions, and you passed your younger days together surrounded by the same adverse circumstances. What you have overcome in yourself, can you not overcome in him? You see the rock that lies in his course. Who but you can keep him clear of it? Who but you, sir?" replied Helena. "What is my influence or my weak wisdom compared with yours? You have the wisdom of love," returned the minor canon, "and it was the highest wisdom ever known upon this earth, remember. As to mine, but the less said of that commonplace commodity the better. Good night." She took the hand he offered her, and gratefully and almost reverently raised it to her lips. "Tut," said the minor canon softly, "I'm much overpaid," and turned away. Retracing his steps towards the cathedral close, he tried, as he went along in the dark, to think out the best means of bringing to pass what he had promised to effect, and what must somehow be done. "I shall probably be asked to marry them," he reflected, "and I would they were married and gone. But this presses first." He debated principally whether he should write to young Drood, or whether he should speak to Jasper. The consciousness of being popular with the whole cathedral establishment inclined him to the latter course, and the well-timed sight of the lighted gatehouse decided him to take it. "I will strike while the iron is hot," he said, and see him now. Jasper was lying asleep on a couch before the fire, when, having ascended the postern stair and received no answer to his knock at the door, Mr. Crisparkle gently turned the handle and looked in. Long afterwards he had cause to remember how Jasper sprang from the couch in a delirious state between sleeping and waking, and crying out, "What is the matter? Who did it?" "It is only I, Jasper. I am sorry to have disturbed you." The glare of his eyes settled down into a look of recognition, and he moved a chair or two to make a way to the fireside. "I was dreaming at a great rate, and am glad to be disturbed from an indigestive after-dinner sleep, not to mention that you are always welcome." "Thank you. I am not confident," returned Mr. Crisparkle, as he sat himself down in the easy chair placed for him, "that my subject will at first sight be quite as welcome as myself. But I am a minister of peace, and I pursue my subject in the interests of peace. In a word, Jasper, I want to establish peace between these two young fellows." A very perplexed expression took hold of Mr. Jasper's face, a very perplexing expression too, for Mr. Crisparkle could make nothing of it. "How?" was Jasper's inquiry, in a low and slow voice, after a silence. "For the how I come to you. I want to ask you to do me the great favor and service of interposing with your nephew. I have already interposed with Mr. Neville, and getting him to write you a short note, in his lively way, saying that he is willing to shake hands. I know what a good-natured fellow he is, and what influence you have with him, and without in the least defending Mr. Neville, we must all admit that he was bitterly stung." Jasper turned that perplexed face towards the fire. Mr. Crisparkle, continuing to observe it, found it even more perplexing than before, inasmuch as it seemed to denote, which could hardly be some close internal calculation. "I know that you are not prepossessed in Mr. Neville's favor," the minor canon was going on, when Jasper stopped him. "You have cause to say so. I am not, truly, undoubtedly, and I admit his lamentable violence of temper, though I hope he and I will get the better of it between us. But I have exacted a very solemn promise from him as to his future demeanor towards your nephew, if you do kindly interpose, and I am sure he will keep it. You are always responsible and trustworthy, Mr. Crisparkle. Do you really feel sure that you can answer for him so confidently?" "I do." The perplexed and perplexing look vanished. "Then you relieve my mind of a great dread and a heavy weight," said Jasper. "I will do it." Mr. Crisparkle, delighted by the swiftness and completeness of his success, acknowledged it in the handsomest terms. "I will do it," repeated Jasper, "for the comfort of having your guarantee against my vague and unfounded fears. You will laugh, but do you keep a diary?" "A line for a day, not more." "A line for a day would be quite as much as my uneventful life would need, heaven knows," said Jasper, taking a book from a desk. "But that my diary is, in fact, a diary of Ned's life too. You will laugh at this entry. You will guess when it was made. Past midnight. After what I have just now seen, I have a morbid dread upon me of some horrible consequences resulting to my dear boy, that I cannot reason with or in any way contend against. All my efforts are vain. The demoniacal passion of this Neville Landless, his strength in his fury, and his savage rage for the destruction of its object, appall me. So profound is the impression, that twice since I have gone into my dear boy's room, to assure myself of his sleeping safely, and not lying dead in his blood. Here is another entry next morning. Ned up and away, light-hearted and unsuspicious as ever. He laughed when I cautioned him, and said he was as good a man as Neville Landless any day. I told him that may be, but he was not as bad a man. He continued to make light of it, but I travelled with him as far as I could, and left him most unwillingly. I am unable to shake off these dark intangible presentiments of evil, if feelings founded upon staring facts are to be so called. Again and again, said Jasper, in conclusion, twirling the leaves of the book before putting it by, I have relapsed into these moods, as other entries show. But I have now your assurance at my back, and shall put it in my book, and make it an antidote to my black humors. Such an antidote, I hope, returned Mr. Crisparkle, as will induce you before long to consign the black humors to the flames. I ought to be the last to find any fault with you this evening, when you have met my wishes so freely, but I must say, Jasper, that your devotion to your nephew has made you exaggerative here. You are my witness, said Jasper, shrugging his shoulders, what my state of mind honestly was but night before I sat down to write, and in what words I expressed it. You remember objecting to a word I used as being too strong? It was a stronger word than any in my diary. Well, well, try the antidote, rejoined Mr. Crisparkle, and may it give you a brighter and better view of the case. We will discuss it no more now. I have to thank you for myself. Thank you sincerely. You shall find, said Jasper, as they shook hands, that I will not do the thing you wish me to do, by halves. I will take care that Ned, giving way at all, shall give way thoroughly. On the third day after this conversation, he called on Mr. Crisparkle with the following letter. My dear Jack, I am touched by your account of your interview with Mr. Crisparkle, whom I much respect and esteem. At once I openly say that I forgot myself on that occasion quite as much as Mr. Landless did, and that I wish that bygone to be a bygone, and all to be right again. Look here, dear old boy, ask Mr. Landless to dinner on Christmas Eve. The better the day, the better the deed, and let there be only we three, and let us shake hands all round there and then, and say no more about it. My dear Jack, ever your most affectionate, Edwin Drood. P.S. Love to Miss Pussy at the next music lesson. You expect Mr. Neville, then? Said Mr. Crisparkle. I count upon his coming, said Mr. Chapter 11. A Picture and a Ring. Behind the most ancient part of Holborn, London, where certain gabled houses some centuries of age still stand looking on the public way, as if disconsolately looking for the old bourne that has long run dry, is a little nook composed of two irregular quadrangles, called Staple Inn. It is one of those nooks, the turning into which out of the clashing street imparts to the relieved pedestrian the sensation of having put cotton in his ears and velvet soles on his boots. It is one of those nooks where a few smoky sparrows twitter in smoky trees, as though they called to one another, "Let us play at country," and where a few feet of garden mold and a few yards of gravel enable them to do that refreshing violence to their tiny understandings. Moreover, it is one of those nooks which are legal nooks, and it contains a little hall, with a little lantern in its roof, to what obstructive purposes devoted, and at whose expense, this history knows not. In the days when Cloisterham took offense at the existence of a railroad afar off, as menacing that sensitive constitution, the property of us Britons, the odd fortune of which sacred institution it is to be in exactly equal degrees croaked about, trembled for, and boasted of. Whatever happens to anything, anywhere in the world, in those days no neighboring architecture of lofty proportions had arisen to overshadow Staple Inn. The westering sun bestowed bright glances on it, and the southwest wind blew into it unimpeded. Neither wind nor sun, however, favored Staple Inn one December afternoon towards 6 o'clock, when it was filled with fog, and candles shed murky and blurred rays through the windows of all its then occupied sets of chambers, notably from a set of chambers in a corner house in the little inner quadrangle, presenting in black and white over its ugly portal the mysterious inscription, P.J.T. 1747, in which set of chambers, never having troubled his head about the inscription, unless to bethink himself at odd times on glancing up at it, that perhaps it may mean perhaps John Thomas, or perhaps Joe Tyler, sat Mr. Grewgious writing by his fire. Who could have told, by looking at Mr. Grewgious, whether he had ever known ambition or disappointment? He had been bred to the bar, and had laid himself out for chamber practice, to draw deeds, convey the wise at call, as Pistol says, but conveyancing, and he had made such a very indifferent marriage of it, that they had separated by consent, if there can be said to be separation where there has never been coming together. No, coy conveyancing would not come to Mr. Grewgious. She was wooed, not won, and they went their several ways. But an arbitration being blown towards him by some unaccountable wind, and he gaining great credit in it as one indefatigable in seeking out right and doing right, a pretty fat receivership was next blown into his pocket by a wind more traceable to its source. So, by chance, he had found his niche, receiver and agent now, to two rich estates, and deputing their legal business, in an amount worth having, to a firm of solicitors on the floor below, he had snuffed out his ambition, supposing him to have ever lighted it, and had settled down with his snuffers for the rest of his life under the dry vine and fig tree of P.J.T., who planted in 1747 many accounts and account books, many files of correspondence, and several strong boxes, garnished Mr. Grewgious's room. They can scarcely be represented as having lumbered it, so conscientious and precise was their orderly arrangement. The apprehension of dying suddenly, and leaving one fact or one figure with any incompleteness or obscurity attaching to it, would have stretched Mr. Grewgious stone dead any day. The largest fidelity to a trust was the life-blood of the man. There are sorts of life-blood that course more quickly, more gaily, more attractively, but there is no better sort in circulation. There was no luxury in his room evening, its comforts were limited to its being dry and warm, and having a snug, though faded fireside. What may be called its private life was confined to the hearth, and an easy chair, and an old-fashioned occasional round table that was brought out upon the rug after business hours, from a corner where it elsewise remained turned up like a shining mahogany shield. Behind it, when standing thus on the defensive, was a closet, usually containing something good to drink. An outer room was the clerk's room. Mr. Grewgious's sleeping room was across the common stair, and he held some not empty cellarage at the bottom of the common stair. 300 days in the year, at least, he crossed over to the hotel in Furnival's Inn for his dinner, and after dinner crossed back again, to make the most of these simplicities until it should become broad business day once more, with P.J.T. date 1747. As Mr. Grewgious sat and wrote by his fire that afternoon, so did the clerk of Mr. Grewgious sit and write by his fire, a pale, puffy-faced, dark-haired person of 30, with big dark eyes that wholly wanted luster, and a dissatisfied doughy complexion that seemed to ask to be sent to the baker's. This attendant was a mysterious being, possessed of some strange power over Mr. Grewgious, as though he had been called into existence, like a fabulous familiar, by a magic spell which had failed when required to dismiss him. He stuck tight to Mr. Grewgious's stool, although Mr. Grewgious's comfort and convenience would manifestly have been advanced by dispossessing him. A gloomy person with tangled locks, and a general air of having been reared under the shadow of that baleful tree of Java which has given shelter to more lies than the whole botanical kingdom, Mr. Grewgious, nevertheless, treated him with unaccountable consideration. "Now, Bazzard," said Mr. Grewgious on the entrance of his clerk, looking up from his papers as he arranged them for the night, "what is in the wind besides fog?" "Mr. Drood," said Bazzard. "What of him?" "As called," said Bazzard. "You may have shown him in." "I am doing it," said Bazzard. The visitor came in accordingly. "Dear me," said Mr. Grewgious, looking round his pair of office candles. "I thought you had called and merely left your name and gone. How do you do, Mr. Edwin? Dear me, you're choking." "It's this fog," returned Edwin, "and it makes my eyes smart, like cayenne pepper." "Is it really so bad as that? Pray undo your wrappers. It's fortunate I have so good a fire, but Mr. Bazzard has taken care of me." "No, I haven't," said Mr. Bazzard at the door. "Ah, then it follows that I must have taken care of myself without observing it," said Mr. Grewgious. "Pray be seated in my chair." "No, I beg," coming out of such an atmosphere, "in my chair." Edwin took the easy chair in the corner, and the fog he had brought in with him, and the fog he took off with his greatcoat and neck shawl, was speedily licked up by the eager fire. "I look," said Edwin, smiling, "as if I had come to stop." "By the by," cried Mr. Grewgious, excuse my interrupting you. Do stop. The fog may clear in an hour or two. We can have dinner in from just across Holborn. You had better take your cayenne pepper here than outside. Pray stop and dine. You are very kind, said Edwin, glancing about him as though attracted by the notion of a new and relishing sort of gypsy party. Not at all, said Mr. Grewgious. You are very kind to join issue with a bachelor in chambers and take pot-luck. And I'll ask, said Mr. Grewgious, dropping his voice and speaking with a twinkling eye as if inspired with a bright thought, I'll ask Bazzard. He mightn't like it else. Bazzard reappeared. Dine soon with Mr. Drood and me. If I am ordered to dine, of course I will, sir, was the gloomy answer. Save the man, cried Mr. Grewgious. You're not ordered, you're invited. Thank you, sir, said Bazzard. In that case I don't care if I do. That's arranged. And perhaps you wouldn't mind, said Mr. Grewgious, stepping over to the hotel in Furnival's and asking them to send in materials for laying the cloth. For dinner we'll have a tureen of the hottest and strongest soup available, and we'll have the best made dish that can be recommended, and we'll have a joint such as a haunch of mutton, and we'll have a goose, or a turkey, or any little stuffed thing of that sort that may happen to be in the bill of fare. In short, we'll have whatever there is on hand. These liberal directions Mr. Grewgious issued with his usual air of reading an inventory, or repeating a lesson, or doing anything else by rote. Bazzard, after drawing out the round table, withdrew to execute them. I was a little delicate, you see, said Mr. Grewgious, in a lower tone, after his clerk's departure, about employing him in the forging or commissariat department, because he mightn't like it. He seems to have his own way, sir, remarked Edwin. His own way? Returned Mr. Grewgious. Oh dear no, poor fellow, you quite mistake him. If he had his own way, he wouldn't be here. I wonder where he would be, Edwin thought, but he only thought it because Mr. Grewgious came and stood himself with his back to the other corner of the fire, and his shoulder blades against the chimney-piece, and collected his skirts for easy conversation. I take it, without having the gift of prophecy, that you have done me the favor of looking in to mention that you are going down over there, where I can tell you are expected, and to offer to execute any little commission from me to my charming ward, and perhaps to sharpen me up a bit in any proceedings. Mr. Edwin, I called, sir, before going down as an act of attention. Of attention, said Mr. Grewgious. Ah, of course, not of impatience. Impatience, sir. Mr. Grewgious had meant to be arch, not that he in the remotest degree expressed that meaning, and had brought himself into scarcely supportable proximity with the fire, as if to burn the fullest effect of his archness into himself, as other subtle impressions are burnt into hard metals. But his archness suddenly flying before the composed face and manner of his visitor, and only the fire remaining, he started and rubbed himself. I have lately been down over there, said Mr. Grewgious, rearranging his skirts, and that was what I referred to when I said I could tell you are expected. Truly, sir, yes, I knew that pussy was looking out for me. Do you keep a cat down there? Asked Mr. Grewgious. Edwin colored a little as he explained. I call Rosa Pussy. Oh, really, said Mr. Grewgious, smoothing down his head. That's very affable. Edwin glanced at his face, uncertain whether or no he seriously objected to the appellation. But Edwin may as well have glanced at the face of a clock. A pet name, sir, he explained again. Said Mr. Grewgious with a nod, but with such an extraordinary compromise between an unqualified assent and a qualified dissent, that his visitor was much disconcerted. Did P. Rosa, Edwin began by way of recovering himself. P. Rosa, repeated Mr. Grewgious. I was going to say pussy, and changed my mind. Did she tell you anything about the Landlesses? No, said Mr. Grewgious. What is the Landlesses? An estate, a villa, a farm, a brother and sister. The sister is at the nun's house and has become a great friend of P. P. Rosas, Mr. Grudis struck in, with a fixed face. She is a strikingly handsome girl, sir, and I thought she may have been described to you, or presented to you perhaps. Neither, said Mr. Grugis, but here is Bazard. Bazard returned, accompanied by 2 waiters, an immovable waiter, and a flying waiter, and the 3 brought in with them as much fog as gave a new roar to the fire. The flying waiter, who had brought everything on his shoulders, laid the cloth with amazing rapidity and dexterity, while the immovable waiter, who had brought nothing, found fault with him. The flying waiter then highly polished all the glasses he had brought, and the immovable waiter looked through them. The flying waiter then flew across Holborn for the soup, and flew back again, and then took another flight for the made dish, and flew back again, and then took another flight for the joint and poultry, and flew back again, and between whiles took supplementary flights for a great variety of articles, as it was discovered from time to time that the immovable waiter had forgotten them all. But let the flying waiter cleave the air as he may, he was always reproached on his return by the immovable waiter for bringing fog with him, and being out of breath. At the conclusion of the repast, by which time the flying waiter was severely blown, the immovable waiter gathered up the tablecloth under his arm with a grand air, and having sternly naught to say with indignation looked on at the flying waiter while he set the clean glasses round, directed a valedictory glance towards Mr. Grugis, conveying, "Let it be clearly understood between us that the reward is mine, and that nil is the claim of this slave," and pushed the flying waiter before him out of the room. It was like a highly finished miniature painting representing my lords of the Circumlocution Department, commandership-in-chief of any sort, government. It was quite an edifying little picture to be hung on the line in the National Gallery. As the fog had been the proximate cause of this sumptuous repast, so the fog served for its general sauce. To hear the outdoor clerks sneezing, wheezing, and beating their feet on the gravel was a zest far surpassing Dr. Kitchener's. To bid, with a shiver, the unfortunate flying waiter shut the door before he had opened it, was a condiment of a profounder flavor than Harvey. And here let it be noticed, parenthetically, that the leg of this young man, in its application to the door, evinced the finest sense of touch, always preceding himself and tray with something of an angling air about it, by some seconds, and always lingering after he and the tray had disappeared, like Max's leg when accompanying him off the stage with reluctance to the assassination of Duncan. The host had gone below to the cellar, and had brought up bottles of ruby, straw-colored, and golden drinks, which had ripened long ago in lands where no fogs are, and had since lain slumbering in the shade, sparkling and tingling after so long a nap. They pushed at their corks to help the corkscrew like prisoners helping riders to force their gates, and danced out gaily. If P.J.T. in 1747, or in any other year of his period, drank such wines, then, for a certainty, P.J.T. was pretty jolly too. Externally, Mr. Grugis showed no signs of being mellowed by these glowing vintages. Instead of his drinking them, they may have been poured over him in his high-dried snuff form, and run to waste, for any lights and shades they caused to flicker over his face. Neither was his manner influenced, but, in his wooden way, he had observant eyes for Edwin, and when at the end of dinner he motioned Edwin back to his own easy chair in the fireside corner, and Edwin sank luxuriously into it after very brief remonstrance, Mr. Grugis, as he turned his seat round towards the fire too, and smoothed his head and face, may have been seen looking at his visitor between his smoothing fingers. "Bezard," said Mr. Grugis, suddenly turning to him. "I follow you, sir," returned Bazard, who had done his work of consuming meat and drink in a workmanlike manner, though mostly in speechlessness. "I drink to you, Bazard, Mr. Edwin, success to Mr. Bezard, success to Mr. Bezard," echoed Edwin with a totally unfounded appearance of enthusiasm, and with the unspoken addition, "What in, I wonder, and may," pursued Mr. Grugis. "I am not at liberty to be definite, may. My conversational powers are so very limited that I know I shall not come well out of this, may. It ought to be put imaginatively, but I have no imagination, may. The thorn of anxiety is as nearly the mark as I am likely to get. May it come out at last. Mr. Bazzard, with a frowning smile at the fire, put a hand into his tangled locks, as if the thorn of anxiety were there, then into his waistcoat, as if it were there, then into his pockets, as if it were there. In all these movements he was closely followed by the eyes of Edwin, as if that young gentleman expected to see the thorn in action. It was not produced, however, and Mr. Bazzard merely said, "I follow you, sir, and I thank you." "I am going," said Mr. Grewgious, jingling his glass on the table with one hand and bending aside under cover of the other to whisper to Edwin to drink to my ward. "But I put Bazzard first. He mightn't like it else." This was said with a mysterious wink, or what would have been a wink if, in Mr. Grewgious's hands, it could have been quick enough. So Edwin winked responsively, without the least idea what he meant by doing so. "And now," said Mr. Grewgious, "I devote a bumper to the fair and fascinating Miss Rosa Bazzard. The fair and fascinating Miss Rosa." "I follow you, sir," said Bazzard, "and I pledge you." "And so do I," said Edwin. "Lord bless me," cried Mr. Grewgious, breaking the blank silence which of course ensued. Though why these pauses should come upon us when we have performed any small social rite, not directly inducive of self-examination or mental despondency, who can tell? I am a particularly angular man, and yet I fancy, if I may use the word, not having a morsel of fancy, that I could draw a picture of a true lover's state of mind tonight. "Let us follow you, sir," said Bazzard, "and have the picture." "Mr. Edwin will correct it where it's wrong," resumed Mr. Grewgious, "and will throw in a few touches from the life. I dare say it is wrong in many particulars, and wants many touches from the life, for I was born a chip, and have neither soft sympathies nor soft experiences. Well, I hazard the guess that the true lover's mind is completely permeated by the beloved object of his affections. I hazard the guess that her dear name is precious to him, cannot be heard or repeated without emotion, and is preserved sacred. If he has any distinguishing appellation of fondness for her, it is reserved for her, and is not for common ears, a name that it would be a privilege to call her by, being alone with her own bright self. It would be a liberty, a coldness, an insensibility, almost a breach of good faith, to flaunt elsewhere. It was wonderful to see Mr. Grewgious sitting bolt upright, with his hands on his knees, continuously chopping this discourse out of himself, much as a charity boy with a very good memory may get his catechism said, and evincing no correspondent emotion whatever, unless in a certain occasional little tingling perceptible at the end of his nose. "My picture," Mr. Grewgious proceeded, "goes on to represent, under correction from you, Mr. Edwin, the true lover, as ever impatient to be in the presence or vicinity of the beloved object of his affections, as caring very little for his case in any other society, and as constantly seeking that. If I was to say seeking that, as a bird seeks its nest, I should make an ass of myself, because that would trench upon what I understand to be poetry, and I am so far from trenching upon poetry at any time, that I never, to my knowledge, got within 10,000 miles of it, and I am besides totally unacquainted with the habits of birds, except the birds of Staple Inn, who seek their nests on ledges, and in better pipes and chimney-pots, not constructed for them by the beneficent hand of nature. I beg, therefore, to be understood as foregoing the bird's nest. But my picture does represent the true lover as having no existence separable from that of the beloved object of his affections, and as living at once a doubled life and a halved life. And if I do not clearly express what I mean by that, it is either for the reason that having no conversational powers, I cannot express what I mean, or that having no meaning, I do not mean what I fail to express, which, to the best of my belief, is not the case. Edwin had turned red and turned white, as certain points of this picture came into the light. He now sat looking at the fire, and bit his lip. "The speculations of an angular man," resumed Mr. Grewgious, still sitting and speaking exactly as before, "are probably erroneous on so globular a topic. But I figure to myself subject, as before, to Mr. Edwin's correction, that there can be no coolness, no lassitude, no doubt, no indifference, no half fire and half smoke state of mind in a real lover. Pray, am I at all near the mark in my picture? As abrupt in his conclusion as in his commencement and progress, he jerked this inquiry at Edwin, and stopped when one may have supposed him in the middle of his oration. I should say, sir, stammered Edwin, as you refer the question to me. Yes, said Mr. Grewgious, I refer it to you as an authority. I should say, then, sir, Edwin went on, embarrassed, that the picture you have drawn is generally correct, but I submit that perhaps you may be rather hard upon the unlucky lover. Likely so, assented Mr. Grewgious, likely so. I am a hard man in the grain. He may not show, said Edwin, all he feels, or he may not. There he stopped so long to find the rest of his sentence that Mr. Grewgious rendered his difficulty 1,000 times the greater by unexpectedly striking in with, no, to be sure, he may not. After that, they all sat silent, the silence of Mr. Bazzard being occasioned by slumber. His responsibility is very great, though, said Mr. Grewgious at length, with his eyes on the fire. Edwin nodded assent, with his eyes on the fire. And let him be sure that he trifles with no one, said Mr. Grewgious, neither with himself nor with any other. Edwin bit his lip again, and still sat looking at the fire. He must not make a plaything of a treasure. Woe betide him if he does. Let him take that well to heart, said Mr. Grewgious. Though he said these things in short sentences, much as the supposititious charity boy just now referred to may have repeated a verse or two from the book of Proverbs, there was something dreamy for so literal a man in the way in which he now shook his right forefinger at the live coals in the grate, and again fell silent. But not for long. As he sat upright and stiff in his chair, he suddenly rapped his knees, like the carved image of some queer joss or other coming out of its reverie, and said, We must finish this bottle, Mr. Edwin. Let me help you. I'll help Bazzard too, though he is asleep. He mightn't like it else. He helped them both, and helped himself, and drained his glass, and stood it bottom upward on the table, as though he had just caught a blue bottle in it. And now, Mr. Edwin, he proceeded, wiping his mouth and hands upon his handkerchief, to a little piece of business. You received from me, the other day, a certified copy of Miss Rose's father's will. You knew its contents before, but you received it from me as a matter of business. I should have sent it to Mr. Jasper, but for Miss Rose's wishing it to come straight to you, in preference. You received it quite safely, sir. You should have acknowledged its receipt, said Mr. Grewgious, business being business all the world over. However, you did not. I meant to have acknowledged it when I first came in this evening, sir. Not a business-like acknowledgment, returned Mr. Grewgious. However, let that pass. Now, in that document you have observed a few words of kindly allusion to its being left to me to discharge a little trust, confided to me in conversation, at such time as I in my discretion may think best. Yes, sir, Mr. Edwin, it came into my mind just now, when I was looking at the fire, that I could, in my discretion, acquit myself of that trust at no better time than the present. Favor me with your attention 1/2 minute. He took a bunch of keys from his pocket, singled out by the candlelight the key he wanted, and then, with a candle in his hand, went to a bureau or escritoire, unlocked it, touched the spring of a little secret drawer, and took from it an ordinary ring case made for a single ring. With this in his hand, he returned to his chair. As he held it up for the young man to see, his hand trembled. Mr. Edwin, this rose of diamonds and rubies delicately set in gold was a ring belonging to Miss Rose's mother. It was removed from her dead hand, in my presence, with such distracted grief as I hope it may never be my lot to contemplate again. Hard man as I am not hard enough for that. See how bright these stones shine, opening the case. And yet the eyes that were so much brighter, and that so often looked upon them with a light and a proud heart, have been ashes among ashes, and dust among dust, some years. If I had any imagination, which it is needless to say I have not, I may imagine that the lasting beauty of these stones was almost cruel. He closed the case again as he spoke. This ring was given to the young lady who was drowned so early in her beautiful and happy career by her husband when they first plighted their faith to one another. It was he who removed it from her unconscious hand, and it was he who, when his death drew very near, placed it in mine. The trust in which I received it was that, you and Miss Rosa growing to manhood and womanhood, and your betrothal prospering and coming to maturity, I should give it to you to place upon her finger. Failing those desired results, it was to remain in my possession. Some trouble was in the young man's face, and some indecision was in the action of his hand, as Mr. Grewgious, looking steadfastly at him, gave him the ring. Your placing it on her finger, said Mr. Grewgious, will be the solemn seal upon your strict fidelity to the living and the dead. You are going to her, to make the last irrevocable preparations for your marriage. Take it with you. The young man took the little case and placed it in his breast. If anything should be amiss, if anything should be even slightly wrong between you, if you should have any secret consciousness that you are committing yourself to this step for no higher reason than because you have long been accustomed to look forward to it, then, said Mr. Grewgious, I charge you once more, by the living and by the dead, to bring that ring back to me. Here Bazzard awoke himself by his own snoring, and, as is usual in such cases, sat apoplectically staring at vacancy, as defying vacancy to accuse him of having been asleep. Bazzard, said Mr. Grewgious, harder than ever. I follow you, sir, said Bazzard, and I have been following you. In discharge of a trust, I have handed Mr. Edwin Drood a ring of diamonds and rubies. You see, Edwin reproduced the little case and opened it, and Bazzard looked into it. I follow you both, sir, returned Bazzard, and I witness the transaction. Evidently anxious to get away and be alone, Edwin Drood now resumed his outer clothing, muttering something about time and appointments. The fog was reported no clearer by the flying waiter, who alighted from a speculative flight in a coffee interest, but he went out into it, and Bazzard, after his manner, followed him. Mr. Grewgious, left alone, walked softly and slowly to and fro for an hour and more. He was restless tonight, and seemed dispirited. I hope I have done right, he said. The appeal to him seemed necessary. It was hard to lose the ring, and yet it must have gone from me very soon. He closed the empty little drawer with a sigh, and shut and locked the escritoire, and came back to the solitary fireside. Her ring, he went on. Will it come back to me? My mind hangs about her ring very uneasily tonight, but that is explainable. I have had it so long, and I have prized it so much. I wonder. He was in a wondering mood as well as a restless, for, though he checked himself at that point, and took another walk, he resumed his wondering when he sat down again. I wonder for the 10,000th time, and what a weak fool I, for what can it signify now? Whether he confided the charge of their orphan child to me, because he knew, good God, how like her mother she has become. I wonder whether he ever so much as suspected that someone doted on her, at a hopeless, speechless distance, when he struck in and won her. I wonder whether it ever crept into his mind who that unfortunate someone was. I wonder whether I shall sleep tonight. At all events, I will shut out the world with the bedclothes and try. Mr. Grewgious crossed the staircase to his raw and foggy bedroom, and was soon ready for bed. Dimly catching sight of his face in the misty looking glass, he held his candle to it for a moment. A likely someone, you, to come into anybody's thoughts in such an aspect, he exclaimed. There, get to bed, poor man, and cease to jabber. With that, he extinguished his light, pulled up the bedclothes around him, and with another sigh shut out the world. And yet there are such unexplored romantic nooks in the unlikeliest men. That evening old Tinderus and Touchwoody P.J.T. Chapter 12. A Night with Durdles. When Mr. Sapsea has nothing better to do towards evening, and finds the contemplation of his own profundity becoming a little monotonous in spite of the vastness of the subject, he often takes an airing in the cathedral close and thereabout. He likes to pass the churchyard with a swelling air of proprietorship, and to encourage in his breast a sort of benignant landlord feeling, in that he has been bountiful towards that meritorious tenant, Mrs. Sapsea, and has publicly given her a prize. He likes to see a stray face or two looking in through the railings, and perhaps reading his inscription. Should he meet a stranger coming from the churchyard with a quick step, he is morally convinced that the stranger is, with a blush retiring, as monumentally directed. Mr. Sapsea's importance has received enhancement, for he has become mayor of Cloisterham. Without mayors, and many of them, it cannot be disputed that the whole framework of society, Mr. Sapsea is confident that he invented that forcible figure, would fall to pieces. Mayors have been knighted for going up, with addresses, explosive machines intrepidly discharging shot and shell into the English grammar. Mr. Sapsea may go up with an address. Rise, Sir Thomas Sapsea, of such is the salt of the earth. Mr. Sapsea has improved the acquaintance of Mr. Jasper since their first meeting to partake of port, epitaph, backgammon, beef, and salad. Mr. Sapsea has been received at the gatehouse with kindred hospitality, and on that occasion Mr. Jasper seated himself at the piano and sang to him, tickling his ears, figuratively, long enough to present a considerable area for tickling. What Mr. Sapsea likes in that young man is that he is always ready to profit by the wisdom of his elders, and that he is sound, sir, at the core. In proof of which, he sang to Mr. Sapsea that evening no kickshaw did his favorites with national enemies, but gave him the genuine George III home brewed, exhorting him as my brave boys to reduce to a smashed condition all other islands but this island, and all continents, peninsulas, isthmuses, promontories, and other geographical forms of land soever, besides sweeping the seas in all directions. In short, he rendered it pretty clear that Providence made a distinct mistake in originating so small a nation of hearts of oak, and so many other verminous peoples. Mr. Sapsea, walking slowly this moist evening near the churchyard with his hands behind him, on the lookout for a blushing and retiring stranger, turns a corner, and comes instead into the goodly presence of the dean, conversing with the verger and Mr. Jasper. Mr. Sapsea makes his obeisance, and is instantly stricken far more ecclesiastical than any Archbishop of York or Canterbury. You are evidently going to write a book about us, Mr. Jasper, quoth the dean, to write a book about us. Well, we are very ancient, and we ought to make a good book. We are not so richly endowed in possessions as in age, but perhaps you will put that in your book, among other things, and call attention to our wrongs. Mr. Tope, as in duty bound, is greatly entertained by this. I really have no intention at all, sir, replies Jasper, of turning author or archaeologist. It is but a whim of mine. And evening for my whim, Mr. Sapsea here is more accountable than I am. How so, Mr. Mayor? Says the dean, with a nod of good-natured recognition of his fetch. How is that, Mr. Mayor? I am not aware, Mr. Sapsea remarks, looking about him for information, to what the very Reverend the Dean does me the honor of referring, and then falls to studying his original in minute points of detail. Durdles, Mr. Tope hints. Aye, the Dean echoes, Durdles, Durdles. The truth is, sir, explains Jasper, that my curiosity in the man was first really stimulated by Mr. Sapsea. Mr. Sapsea's knowledge of mankind and power of drawing out whatever is recluse or odd around him first led to my bestowing a second thought upon the man, though of course I had met him constantly about. You would not be surprised by this, Mr. Dean, if you had seen Mr. Sapsea deal with him in his own parlor as I did. Oh, cries Sapsea, picking up the ball thrown to him with ineffable complacency and pomposity. Yes, yes. The very Reverend the Dean refers to that. Yes, I happened to bring Durdles and Mr. Jasper together. I regard Durdles as a character, Mr. Sapsea, that with a few skillful touches you turn inside out, says Jasper. No, not quite that, returns the lumbering auctioneer. I may have a little influence over him, perhaps, and a little insight into his character, perhaps. The very Reverend the Dean will please to bear in mind that I have seen the world. Here Mr. Sapsea gets a little behind the Dean, to inspect his coat buttons. Well, says the Dean, looking about him to see what has become of his copyist, I hope, Mr. Mayor, you will use your study and knowledge of Durdles to the good purpose of exhorting him not to break our worthy and respected choir master's neck. We cannot afford it. His head and voice are much too valuable to us. Mr. Tope is again highly entertained, and having fallen into respectful convulsions of laughter, subsides into a deferential murmur, importing that surely any gentleman would deem it a pleasure and an honor to have his neck broken in return for such a compliment from such a source. I will take it upon myself, sir, observes Sapsea loftily, to answer for Mr. Jasper's neck. I will tell Durdles to be careful of it. He will mind what I say. How is it at present endangered? He inquires, looking about him with magnificent patronage. Only by my making a moonlight expedition with Durdles among the tombs, vaults, towers, and ruins, returns Jasper. You remember suggesting, when you brought us together, that, as a lover of the picturesque, it may be worth my while. I remember, replies the auctioneer, and the solemn idiot really believes that he does remember. Profiting by your hint, pursues Jasper, I have had some day rambles with the extraordinary old fellow, and we are to make a moonlight hole and corner exploration tonight. And here he is, says the Dean. Durdles, with his dinner bundle in his hand, is truly beheld slouching towards them. Slouching nearer, and perceiving the Dean, he pulls off his hat, and is slouching away with it under his arm, when Mr. Sapsea stops him. Mind you take care of my friend, is the injunction Mr. Sapsea lays upon him. What friend O'Yorn is dead? Asks Durdles. No orders has come in for any friend O'Yorn. I mean my live friend there. Oh, him? Says Durdles. He can take care of himself, can Mr. Jasper. But do you take care of him too, says Sapsea, whom Durdles, there being command in his tone, surlily surveys from head to foot. With submission to his reverence the Dean, if you'll mind what concerns you, Mr. Sapsea, Durdles he'll mind what concerns him. You're out of temper, says Mr. Sapsea, winking to the company to observe how smoothly he will manage him. My friend concerns me, and Mr. Jasper is my friend, and you are my friend. Don't you get into a bad habit of boasting, retorts Durdles, with a grave cautionary nod. It'll grow upon you. You are out of temper, says Sapsea again, reddening, but again sinking to the company. I own to it, returns Durdles. I don't like liberties. Mr. Sapsea winks a third wink to the company, as who should say, I think you will agree with me that I have settled his business, and stalks out of the controversy. Durdles then gives the Dean a good evening, and adding, as he puts his hat on, you'll find me at home, Mr. Jasper, as agreed, when you want me. I'm going home to clean myself. Soon slouches out of sight. This going home to clean himself is one of the man's incomprehensible compromises with inexorable facts. He, and his hat, and his boots, and his clothes, never showing any trace of cleaning, but being uniformly in one condition of dust and grit. The lamplighter now dotting the quiet close with specks of light, and running at a great rate up and down his little ladder with that object, his little ladder under the sacred shadow of whose inconvenience generations had grown up, and which all Cloisterham would have stood aghast at the idea of abolishing. The Dean withdraws to his dinner, Mr. Tope to his tea, and Mr. Jasper to his piano. There, with no light but that of the fire, he sits chanting choir music in a low and beautiful voice, for 2 or 3 hours, in short, until it has been for some time dark, and the moon is about to rise. Then he closes his piano softly, changes his coat for a pea-jacket, with a goodly wicker-cased bottle in its largest pocket, and putting on a low crown, flap-brimmed hat, goes softly out. Why does he move so softly tonight? No outward reason is apparent for it. Can there be any sympathetic reason crouching darkly within him? repairing to Durdles's unfinished house or hole in the city wall, and seeing a light within it, he softly picks his course among the gravestones, monuments, and stony lumber of the yard, already touched here and there, sidewise, by the rising moon. The two journeymen have left their two great saws sticking in their blocks of stone, and two skeleton journeymen out of the dance of death may be grinning in the shadow of their sheltering sentry boxes, about to slash away at cutting out the gravestones of the next two people destined to die in Cloisterham. Likely enough, the two think little of that now, being alive, and perhaps merry. Curious to make a guess at the two, or say one of the two. Ho, Durdles! The light moves, and he appears with it at the door. He would seem to have been cleaning himself, with the aid of a bottle, jug, and tumbler, for no other cleansing instruments are visible in the bare brick room with rafters overhead and no plastered ceiling, into which he shows his visitor. Are you ready? I am ready, Mr. Jasper. Let the old uns come out if they dare, when we go among their tombs. My spirit is ready for 'em. Do you mean animal spirits, or ardent? The one's the t'other, answers Durdles, and I mean 'em both. He takes a lantern from a hook, puts a match or two in his pocket with which to light it, should there be need, and they go out together, dinner bundle and all. Surely an unaccountable sort of expedition, that Durdles himself, who is always prowling among old graves and ruins like a ghoul, that he should be stealing forth to climb and dive and wander without an object, is nothing extraordinary, but that the choir master or any one else should hold it worth his while to be with him, and to study moonlight effects in such company is another affair. Surely an unaccountable sort of expedition, therefore. Where that there mound by the yard gate, Mr. Jasper. I see it. What is it? Lime. Mr. Jasper stops and waits for him to come up, for he lags behind. What you call quicklime? Aye, says Durdles, quick enough to eat your boots, with a little handy stirring, quick enough to eat your bones. They go on, soon passing the red windows of the traveller's twopenny, and emerging into the clear moonlight of the monk's vineyard. This crossed, they come to Minor Canon Corner, of which the greater part lies in shadow until the moon shall rise higher in the sky. The sound of a closing house door strikes their ears, and two men come out. These are Mr. Crisparkle and Neville. Jasper, with a strange and sudden smile upon his face, lays the palm of his hand upon the breast of Durdles, stopping him where he stands. At that end of Minor Canon Corner the shadow is profound in the existing state of the light. At that end, too, there is a piece of old dwarf wall, breast high, the only remaining boundary of what was once a garden, but is now the thoroughfare. Jasper and Durdles would have turned this wall in another instant, but, stopping so short, stand behind it. Those two are only sauntering. Jasper whispers, they will go out into the moonlight soon. Let us keep quiet here, or they will detain us, or want to join us, or what not. Durdles nods assent and falls to munching some fragments from his bundle. Jasper folds his arms upon the top of the wall, and, with his chin resting on them, watches. He takes no note whatever of the Minor Canon, but watches Neville, as though his eye were at the trigger of a loaded rifle, and he had covered him, and were going to fire. A sense of destructive power is so expressed in his face, that evening Durdles pauses in his munching, and looks at him, with an unmunched something in his cheek. Meanwhile Mr. Crisparkle and Neville walk to and fro, quietly talking together. What they say cannot be heard consecutively, but Mr. Jasper has already distinguished his own name more than once. This is the first day of the week, Mr. Crisparkle can be distinctly heard to observe, as they turn back, and the last day of the week is Christmas Eve. You may be certain of me, sir. The echoes were favorable at those points, but as the two approach, the sound of their talking becomes confused again. The word confidence, shattered by the echoes, but still capable of being pieced together, is uttered by Mr. Crisparkle. As they draw still nearer, this fragment of a reply is heard, not deserved yet, but shall be, sir. As they turn away again, Jasper again hears his own name in connection with the words from Mr. Crisparkle, remember that I said I answered for you confidently. Then the sound of their talk becomes confused again, they halting for a little while, and some earnest action on the part of Neville succeeding. When they move once more, Mr. Crisparkle is seen to look up at the sky, and to point before him. They then slowly disappear, passing out into the moonlight at the opposite end of the corner. It is not until they are gone that Mr. Jasper moves, but then he turns to Durdles and bursts into a fit of laughter. Durdles, who still has that suspended something in his cheek, and who sees nothing to laugh at, stares at him until Mr. Jasper lays his face down on his arms to have his laugh out. Then Durdles bolts the something, as if desperately resigning himself to indigestion. Among those secluded nooks there is very little stir or movement after dark. There is little enough in the high tide of the day, but there is next to none at night. Besides that the cheerfully frequented High Street lies nearly parallel to the spot the old cathedral rising between the two, and is the natural channel in which the cloister-ram traffic flows, a certain awful hush pervades the ancient pile, the cloisters, and the churchyard, after dark, which not many people care to encounter. Ask the first 100 citizens of Cloisterham, met at random in the streets at noon, if they believed in ghosts. They would tell you no, but put them to choose at night between these eerie precincts and the thoroughfare of shops, and you would find that 99 declared for the longer round and the more frequented way. The cause of this is not to be found in any local superstition that attaches to the precincts, albeit a mysterious lady, with a child in her arms and a rope dangling from her neck, has been seen flitting about there by sundry witnesses as intangible as herself. But it is to be sought in the innate shrinking of dust with a breath of life in it from dust out of which the breath of life has passed, also, in the widely diffused, and almost as widely unacknowledged, reflection, if the dead do, under any circumstances, become visible to the living, these are such likely surroundings for the purpose that I, the living, will get out of them as soon as I can. Therefore, when Mr. Jasper and Durdles pause to glance around them before descending into the crypt by a small side door, of which the latter has a key, the whole expanse of moonlight in their view is utterly deserted. One may fancy that the tide of life was stemmed by Mr. Jasper's own gatehouse. The murmur of the tide is heard beyond, but no wave passes the archway, over which his lamp burns red behind his curtain, as if the building were a lighthouse. They enter, locking themselves in, descend the rugged steps, and are down in the crypt. The lantern is not wanted, for the moonlight strikes in at the groined windows, bare of glass, the broken frames for which cast patterns on the ground, the heavy pillars, which support the roof engender masses of black shade, but between them there are lanes of light. Up and down these lanes they walk, Durdles discoursing of the old uns he yet counts on disinterring, and slapping a wall, in which he considers a whole family on to be stoned and earthed up, just as if he were a familiar friend of the family. The taciturnity of Durdles is for the time overcome by Mr. Jasper's wicker bottle, which circulates freely, in the sense, that is to say, that its contents enter freely into Mr. Durdles's circulation, while Mr. Jasper only rinses his mouth once and casts forth the rinsing. They are to ascend the great tower. On the steps by which they rise to the cathedral, Durdles pauses for new store of breath. The steps are very dark, but out of the darkness they can see the lanes of light they have traversed. Durdles seats himself upon a step. Mr. Jasper seats himself upon another. The odor from the wicker bottle which has somehow passed into Durdles's keeping soon intimates that the cork has been taken out, but this is not ascertainable through the sense of sight, since neither can descry the other. And yet, in talking, they turn to one another as though their faces could commune together. This is good stuff, Mr. Jasper. It is very good stuff, I hope. I bought it on purpose. They don't show, you see, the old uns don't, Mr. Jasper. It would be a more confused world than it is if they could. Well, it would lead towards a mixing of things, Durdles acquiesces, pausing on the remark, as if the idea of ghosts had not previously presented itself to him in a merely inconvenient light, domestically or chronologically. But do you think there may be ghosts of other things, though not of men and women? What things? Flower beds and watering pots, horses and harness. No, sounds. What sounds? Cries. What cries do you mean? Chairs to mend? No, I mean screeches. Now I'll tell you, Mr. Jarsper. Wait a bit till I put the bottle right. Here the cork is evidently taken out again and replaced again. There, now it's right. This time last year, only a few days later, I happened to have been doing what was correct by the season, in the way of giving it the welcome it had a right to expect, when them town boys set on me at their worst. At length I gave 'em the slip and turned in here. And here I fell asleep. And what woke me? The ghost of a cry, the ghost of one terrific shriek, which shriek was followed by the ghost of the howl of a dog, a long, dismal, woeful howl, such as a dog gives when a person's dead. That was my last Christmas Eve. What do you mean? Is the very abrupt and, one may say, fierce retort. I mean that I made inquiries everywhere about, and that no living ears but mine heard either that cry or that howl. So I say they was both ghosts, though why they came to me, I've never made out. I thought you were another kind of man, says Jasper, scornfully. So I thought myself, answers Durdles with his usual composure, and yet I was picked out for it. Jasper had risen suddenly when he asked him what he meant, and he now says, "Come, we shall freeze here, lead the way." Durdles complies, not over steadily, opens the door at the top of the steps with the key he has already used, and so emerges on the cathedral level in a passage at the side of the chancel. Here, the moonlight is so very bright again that the colors of the nearest stained glass window are thrown upon their faces. The appearance of the unconscious Durdles, holding the door open for his companion to follow, as if from the grave, is ghastly enough, with a purple hand across his face and a yellow splash upon his brow, but he bears the close scrutiny of his companion in an insensible way, although it is prolonged while the latter fumbles among his pockets for a key confided to him that will open an iron gate, so to enable them to pass to the staircase of the great tower. That and the bottle are enough for you to carry, he says, giving it to Durdles. Hand your bundle to me. I am younger and longer-winded than you. Durdles hesitates for a moment between bundle and bottle, but gives the preference to the bottle as being by far the better company, and consigns the dry weight to his fellow explorer. Then they go up the winding staircase of the great tower, toilsomely, turning, and lowering their heads to avoid the stairs above, or the rough stone pivot around which they twist. Durdles has lighted his lantern by drawing from the cold, hard wall a spark of that mysterious fire which lurks in everything, and, guided by this speck, they clamber up among the cobwebs and the dust. Their way lies through strange places. Twice or thrice they emerge into level, low-arched galleries, from where they can look down into the moonlit nave, and where Durdles, waving his lantern, waves the dim angels' heads upon the corbels of the roof, seeming to watch their progress. Soon they turn into narrower and steeper staircases, and the night air begins to blow upon them, and the chirp of some startled jackdaw or frightened rook precedes the heavy beating of wings in a confined space, and the beating down of dust and straws upon their heads. At last, leaving their light behind a stair, for it blows fresh up here, they look down on Cloisterham, fair to see in the moonlight, its ruined habitations and sanctuaries of the dead at the tower's base, its moss-softened red-tiled roofs and red-brick houses of the living clustered beyond, its river winding down from the mist on the horizon as though that were its source, and already heaving with a restless knowledge of its approach towards the sea. Once again, an unaccountable expedition this. Jasper, always moving softly with no visible reason, contemplates the scene, and especially that stillest part of it which the cathedral overshadows. But he contemplates Durdles quite as curiously, and Durdles is by times conscious of his watchful eyes. Only by times, because Durdles is growing drowsy, as aeronauts lighten the load they carry when they wish to rise. Similarly, Durdles has lightened the wicker bottle in coming up. Snatches of sleep surprise him on his legs and stop him in his talk. A mild fit of calenture seizes him, in which he deems that the ground so far below is on a level with the tower, and would as lief walk off the tower into the air as not. Such is his state when they begin to come down. And as aeronauts make themselves heavier when they wish to descend, similarly Durdles charges himself with more liquid from the wicker bottle, that he may come down the better. The iron gate attained and locked, but not before Durdles has tumbled twice and cut an eyebrow open once. They descend into the crypt again, with the intent of issuing forth as they entered. But, while returning among those lanes of light, Durdles becomes so very uncertain, both of foot and speech, that he half drops, half throws himself down by one of the heavy pillars, scarcely less heavy than itself, and indistinctly appeals to his companion for 40 winks of a second each. "If you will have it so, or must have it so," replies Jasper, "I'll not leave you here. Take them, while I walk to and fro." Durdles is asleep at once, and in his sleep he dreams a dream. It is not much of a dream, considering the vast extent of the domains of dreamland and their wonderful productions. It is only remarkable for being unusually restless and unusually real. He dreams of lying there, asleep, and yet counting his companion's footsteps as he walks to and fro. He dreams that the footsteps die away into distance of time and of space, and that something touches him, and that something falls from his hand. Then something clinks and gropes about, and he dreams that he is alone for so long a time that the lanes of light take new directions as the moon advances in her course. From succeeding unconsciousness he passes into a dream of slow uneasiness from cold, and painfully awakes to a perception of the lanes of light, really changed, much as he had dreamed, and Jasper walking among them, beating his hands and feet. "Halloa!" Durdles cries out, unmeaningly alarmed. "Awake at last," says Jasper, coming up to him. "Do you know that your 40s have stretched into thousands?" "No, they have though. What's the time? Hark! The bells are going in the tower. They strike 4 quarters, and then the great bell strikes 2, cries Durdles, scrambling up. "Why didn't you try to wake me, Mr. Jasper?" "I did. I may as well have tried to wake the dead, your own family of dead, up in the corner there." "Did you touch me?" "Touch you?" "Yes, shook you." As Durdles recalls that touching something in his dream, he looks down on the pavement, and sees the key of the crypt door lying close to where he himself lay. "I dropped you, did I?" he says, picking it up, and recalling that part of his dream. As he gathers himself up again into an upright position, or into a position as nearly upright as he ever maintains, he is again conscious of being watched by his companion. "Well," says Jasper, smiling, "are you quite ready? Pray don't hurry. Let me get my bundle right, Mr. Jasper, and I'm with you." As he ties it afresh, he is once more conscious that he is very narrowly observed. "What do you suspect me of, Mr. Jasper?" he asks with drunken displeasure. "Let them as has any suspicions of Durdles name M. I've no suspicions of you, my good Mr. Durdles, but I have suspicions that my bottle was filled with something stiffer than either of us supposed. And I also have suspicions," Jasper adds, taking it from the pavement and turning it bottom upwards, "that it's empty." Durdles condescends to laugh at this, continuing to chuckle when his laugh is over. As though remonstrant with himself on his drinking powers, he rolls to the door and unlocks it. They both pass out, and Durdles relocks it and pockets his key. "A thousand thanks for a curious and interesting night," says Jasper, giving him his hand. "You can make your own way home?" "I should think so," answers Durdles. If you was to offer Durdles the affront to show him his way home, he wouldn't go home. Durdles wouldn't go home till morning. And then Durdles wouldn't go home. Durdles wouldn't. This with the utmost defiance. "Good night, then. Good night, Mr. Jasper." Each is turning his own way, when a sharp whistle rends the silence, and the jargon is yelped out. "Witty witty one. I, tet, ches, out, ter, 10. Witty witty why, then, don't, go, then, I, shy, witty witty wake cock warning." Instantly afterwards, a rapid fire of stones rattles at the cathedral wall, and the hideous small boy is beheld opposite, dancing in the moonlight. "What? Is that baby devil on the watch there?" cries Jasper in a fury, so quickly roused and so violent that he seems an older devil himself. "I shall shed the blood of that impish wretch. I know I shall do it." Regardless of the fire, though it hits him more than once, he rushes at Deputy, collars him, and tries to bring him across. But Deputy is not to be so easily brought across. With a diabolical insight into the strongest part of his position, he is no sooner taken by the throat than he curls up his legs, forces his assailant to hang him, as it were, and gurgles in his throat, and screws his body, and twists, as already undergoing the first agonies of strangulation. There is nothing for it but to drop him. He instantly gets himself together, backs over to Durdles, and cries to his assailant, gnashing the great gap in front of his mouth with rage and malice. "I'll blind yer, help me. I'll stone your eyes out, help me, if I don't have your eyesight," bellows me, at the same time dodging behind Durdles and snarling at Jasper, now from this side of him and now from that, prepared, if pounced upon, to dart away in all manner of curvilinear directions, and, if run down after all, to grovel in the dust and cry, "Now hit me when I'm down." "Do it. Don't hurt the boy, Mr. Jasper," urges Durdles, shielding him. "Recollect yourself. He followed us tonight, when we first came here." "Yer lie, I didn't," replies Deputy, in his one form of polite contradiction. "He has been prowling near us ever since." "Yer lie, I haven't," returns Deputy. "I'd only just come out for my elf, when I see you two coming out of the Kinfriederl. I tet ches im out ter 10. With the usual rhythm and dance, though dodging behind Durdles. "It ain't any fault, is it? Take him home, then," retorts Jasper, ferociously, though with a strong check upon himself, "and let my eyes be rid of the sight of you." Deputy, with another sharp whistle, at once expressing his relief, and his commencement of a milder stoning of Mr. Durdles, begins stoning that respectable gentleman home, as if he were a reluctant ox. Mr. Jasper goes to his gatehouse brooding. Chapter 14. When shall these three meet again? Christmas Eve in Cloisterham. A few strange faces in the streets, a few other faces, half strange and half familiar, once the faces of Cloisterham children, now the faces of men and women who come back from the outer world at long intervals to find the city wonderfully shrunken in size, as if it had not washed by any means well in the meanwhile. To these, the striking of the cathedral clock and the cawing of the rooks from the cathedral tower are like voices of their nursery time. To such as these, it has happened in their dying hours afar off, that they have imagined their chamber floor to be strewn with the autumnal leaves fallen from the elm trees in the close. So have the rustling sounds and fresh scents of their earliest impressions revived when the circle of their lives was very nearly traced, and the beginning and the end were drawing close together. Seasonable tokens are about. Red berries shine here and there in the lattices of Minor Canon Corner. Mr. and Mrs. Tope are daintily sticking sprigs of holly into the carvings and sconces of the cathedral stalls, as if they were sticking them into the coat buttonholes of the dean and chapter. Lavish profusion is in the shops, particularly in the articles of currants, raisins, spices, candied peel, and moist sugar. An unusual air of gallantry and dissipation is abroad, evinced in an immense bunch of mistletoe hanging in the greengrocer's shop doorway, and a poor little 12th cake, culminating in the figure of a harlequin, such a very poor little 12th cake, that one would rather called it a 24th cake or a 48th cake, to be raffled for at the pastrycook's, terms 1 shilling per member. Public amusements are not wanting. The waxwork which made so deep an impression on the reflective mind of the Emperor of China is to be seen by particular desire during Christmas week only, on the premises of the bankrupt livery stable keeper up the lane, and a new grand comic Christmas pantomime is to be produced at the theatre, the latter heralded by the portrait of Signor Jacksonini the clown, saying, "How do you do to tomorrow?" quite as large as life, and almost as miserably. In short, Cloisterham is up and doing, though from this description the High School and Miss Twinkleton's are to be excluded. From the former establishment the scholars have gone home, every one of them in love with one of Miss Twinkleton's young ladies who knows nothing about it, and only the handmaidens flutter occasionally in the windows of the latter. It is noticed, by the by, that these damsels become, within the limits of decorum, more skittish when thus entrusted with the concrete representation of their sex than when dividing the representation with Miss Twinkleton's young ladies. 3 are to meet at the gatehouse tonight. How does each one of the 3 get through the day? Neville Landless, though absolved from his books for the time by Mr. Crisparkle, whose fresh nature is by no means insensible to the charms of a holiday, reads and writes in his quiet room, with a concentrated air, until it is 2 hours past noon. He then sets himself to clearing his table, to arranging his books, and to tearing up and burning his stray papers. He makes a clean sweep of all untidy accumulations, puts all his drawers in order, and leaves no note or scrap of paper undestroyed, save such memoranda as bear directly on his studies. This done, he turns to his wardrobe, selects a few articles of ordinary wear, among them change of stout shoes and socks for walking, and packs these in a knapsack. This knapsack is new, and he bought it in the High Street yesterday. He also purchased, at the same time and at the same place, a heavy walking stick, strong in the handle for the grip of the hand, and iron-shod. He tries this, swings it, poises it, and lays it by, with the knapsack, on a window seat. By this time his arrangements are complete. He dresses for going out, and is in the act of going. Truly has left his room, and has met the minor canon on the staircase, coming out of his bedroom upon the same story, when he turns back again for his walking stick, thinking he will carry it now. Mr. Crisparkle, who has paused on the staircase, sees it in his hand on his immediately reappearing, takes it from him, and asks him with a smile how he chooses a stick. Really, I don't know that I understand the subject, he answers. I chose it for its weight. Much too heavy, Neville, much too heavy to rest upon in a long walk, sir. Rest upon? Repeats Mr. Crisparkle, throwing himself into pedestrian form. You don't rest upon it, you merely balance with it. I shall know better with practice, sir. I have not lived in a walking country, you know. True, says Mr. Crisparkle. Get into a little training, and we will have a few score miles together. I should leave you nowhere now. Do you come back before dinner? I think not, as we dine early. Mr. Crisparkle gives him a bright nod and a cheerful goodbye, expressing not without intention absolute confidence and ease. Neville repairs to the nun's house, and requests that Miss Landless may be informed that her brother is there, by appointment. He waits at the gate, not even crossing the threshold, for he is on his parole not to put himself in Rosa's way. His sister is at least as mindful of the obligation they have taken on themselves as he can be, and loses not a moment in joining him. They meet affectionately, avoid lingering there, and walk towards the upper inland country. I am not going to tread upon forbidden ground, Helena, says Neville, when they have walked some distance and are turning. You will understand in another moment that I cannot help referring to, what shall I say, my infatuation. Had you not better avoid it, Neville? You know that I can hear nothing. You can hear, my dear, what Mr. Crisparkle has heard, and heard with approval. Yes, I can hear so much. Well, it is this. I am not only unsettled and unhappy myself, but I am conscious of unsettling and interfering with other people. How do I know that? But for my unfortunate presence, you, and the rest of that former party, our engaging guardian excepted, may be dining cheerfully in Minor Canon Corner tomorrow. Truly, it probably would be so. I can see too well that I am not high in the old lady's opinion, and it is easy to understand what an irksome clog I must be upon the hospitalities of her orderly house, especially at this time of year, when I must be kept asunder from this person, and there is such a reason for my not being brought into contact with that person, and an unfavorable reputation has preceded me with such another person, and so on. I have put this very gently to Mr. Crisparkle, for you know his self-denying ways, but still I have put it. What I have laid much greater stress upon at the same time is that I'm engaged in a miserable struggle with myself, and that a little change and absence may enable me to come through it the better. So, the weather being bright and hard, I am going on a walking expedition, and intend taking myself out of everybody's way, my own included, I hope to tomorrow morning, when to come back in a fortnight, and going quite alone. I am much better without company. Evening, if there were any one but you to bear me company, my dear Helena. Mr. Crisparkle entirely agrees, you say? Entirely. I am not sure, but that at first he was inclined to think it rather a moody scheme, and one that may do a brooding mind harm. But we took a moonlight walk last Monday night, to talk it over at leisure, and I represented the case to him as it really is. I showed him that I do want to conquer myself, and that, this evening well got over, it is surely better that I should be away from here just now than here. I could hardly help meeting certain people walking together here, and that could do no good, and is certainly not the way to forget. A fortnight, therefore, that chance will probably be over for the time, and when it again arises for the last time, why, I can again go away. Farther, I really do feel hopeful of bracing exercise and wholesome fatigue. You know that Mr. Crisparkle allows such things their full weight in the preservation of his own sound mind in his own sound body, and that his just spirit is not likely to maintain one set of natural laws for himself and another for me. He yielded to my view of the matter, when convinced that I was honestly in earnest, and so, with his full consent, I start to tomorrow morning, early enough to be not only out of the streets, but out of hearing of the bells, when the good people go to church. Helena thinks it over, and thinks well of it. Mr. Crisparkle doing so, she would do so, but she does originally, out of her own mind, think well of it, as a healthy project, denoting a sincere endeavor and an active attempt at self-correction. She is inclined to pity him, poor fellow, for going away solitary on the great Christmas festival, but she feels it much more to the purpose to encourage him, and she does encourage him. He will write to her. He will write to her every alternate day, and tell her all his adventures. Does he send clothes on in advance of him? My dear Helena, no, travel like a pilgrim, with wallet and staff. My wallet, or my knapsack, is packed, and ready for strapping on, and here is my staff. He hands it to her. She makes the same remark as Mr. Crisparkle, that it is very heavy, and gives it back to him, asking what wood it is. Ironwood. Up to this point he has been extremely cheerful. Perhaps the having to carry his case with her, and therefore to present it in its brightest aspect, has roused his spirits. Perhaps the having done so with success is followed by a revulsion. As the day closes in and the city lights begin to spring up before them, he grows depressed. I wish I were not going to this dinner, Helena. Dear Neville, is it worth while to care much about it? Think how soon it will be over. How soon it will be over. He repeats gloomily, yes, but I don't like it. There may be a moment's awkwardness, she cheeringly represents to him, but it can only last a moment. He is quite sure of himself. I wish I felt as sure of everything else as I feel of myself, he answers her. How strangely you speak, dear. What do you mean, Helena? I don't know. I only know that I don't like it. What a strange dead weight there is in the air. She calls his attention to those copperous clouds beyond the river and says that the wind is rising. He scarcely speaks again until he takes leave of her at the gate of the nun's house. She does not immediately enter when they have parted, but remains looking after him along the street. Twice he passes the gatehouse, reluctant to enter. At length, the cathedral clock chiming 1/4, with a rapid turn he hurries in, and so he goes up the postern stair. Edwin Drood passes a solitary day. Something of deeper moment than he had thought has gone out of his life, and in the silence of his own chamber he wept for it last night. Though the image of Miss Landless still hovers in the background of his mind, the pretty little affectionate creature, so much firmer and wiser than he had supposed, occupies its stronghold. It is with some misgiving of his own unworthiness that he thinks of her, and of what they may have been to one another. If he had been more in earnest some time ago, if he had set a higher value on her, if, instead of accepting his lot in life as an inheritance of course, he had studied the right way to its appreciation and enhancement. And still, for all this, and though there is a sharp heartache in all this, the vanity and caprice of youth sustain that handsome figure of Miss Landless in the background of his mind. That was a curious look of Rosa's when they parted at the gate. Did it mean that she saw below the surface of his thoughts and down into their twilight depths? Scarcely that, for it was a look of astonished and keen inquiry. He decides that he cannot understand it, though it was remarkably expressive, as he only waits for Mr. Drood just now, and will depart immediately after having seen him. He takes a sauntering leave of the ancient city and its neighborhood. He recalls the time when Rosa and he walked here or there, mere children, full of the dignity of being engaged. Poor children, he thinks with a pitying sadness. Finding that his watch has stopped, he turns into the jeweler's shop to have it wound and set. The jeweler is knowing on the subject of a bracelet, which he begs leave to submit in a general and quite aimless way. It would suit, he considers, a young bride to perfection, especially if of a rather diminutive style of beauty. Finding the bracelet but coldly looked at, the jeweler invites attention to a tray of rings for gentlemen. Here is a style of ring, now, he remarks, a very chaste signet, which gentlemen are much given to purchasing when changing their condition. A ring of a very responsible appearance, with the date of their wedding day engraved inside. Several gentlemen have preferred it to any other kind of memento. The rings are as coldly viewed as the bracelet. Edwin tells the tempter that he wears no jewelry but his watch and chain, which were his father's, and his shirt-pin. That I was aware of, is the jeweler's reply, for Mr. Jasper dropped in for a watch glass the other day, and, in fact, I showed these articles to him, remarking that if he should wish to make a present to a gentleman relative, on any particular occasion, but he said with a smile that he had an inventory in his mind of all the jewelry his gentleman relative ever wore, namely, his watch and chain, and his shirt-pin. Still the jeweler considers that may not apply to all times, though applying to the present time. 20 minutes past 2, Mr. Drood, I set your watch at. Let me recommend you not to let it run down, sir. Edwin takes his watch, puts it on, and goes out, thinking, dear old Jack, if I were to make an extra crease in my neckcloth, he would think it worth noticing. He strolls about and about to pass the time until the dinner hour. It somehow happens that Cloisterham seems reproachful to him today, has fault to find with him, as if he had not used it well, but is far more pensive with him than angry. His wonted carelessness is replaced by a wistful looking at, and dwelling upon, all the old landmarks. He will soon be far away, and may never see them again, he thinks. Poor youth! Poor youth! As dusk draws on, he paces the monk's vineyard. He has walked to and fro full half an hour by the cathedral chimes, and it has closed and dark before he becomes quite aware of a woman crouching on the ground near a wicket gate in a corner. The gate commands a cross-by path, little used in the gloaming, and the figure must have been there all the time, though he has but gradually and lately made it out. He strikes into that path and walks up to the wicket. By the light of a lamp near it, he sees that the woman is of a haggard appearance, and that her weazen chin is resting on her hands, and that her eyes are staring, with an unwinking, blind sort of steadfastness, before her. Always kindly, but moved to be unusually kind this evening, and having bestowed kind words on most of the children and aged people he has met, he at once bends down and speaks to this woman. Are you ill? No, dearie, she answers, without looking at him, and with no departure from her strange blind stare. Are you blind? No, dearie. Are you lost, homeless, faint? What is the matter, that you stay here in the cold so long, without moving? By slow and stiff efforts, she appears to contract her vision until it can rest upon him, and then a curious film passes over her, and she begins to shake. He straightens himself, recoils a step, and looks down at her in a dread amazement, for he seems to know her. Good heaven, he thinks, next moment, Like Jack that night, as he looks down at her, she looks up at him and whimpers, "My lungs is weakly, my lungs is dreadful bad. Poor me, my cough is rattling dry, and coughs in confirmation horribly. Where do you come from?" "Come from London, dearie," her cough still rending her. "Where are you going to?" "Back to London, dearie. I came here, looking for a needle in a haystack, and I ain't found it. Look'ee, dearie, give me 3 and 6pence, and don't you be afeard for me. I'll get back to London then, and trouble no one. I'm in a business. Ah, me, it's slack, and times is very bad, but I can make a shift to live by it." "Do you eat opium?" "Smokes it," she replies with difficulty, still racked by her cough. "Give me 3 and 6pence, and I'll lay it out well, and get back. If you don't give me 3 and 6pence, don't give me a brass farden. And if you do give me 3 and 6pence, dearie, I'll tell you something." He counts the money from his pocket and puts it in her hand. She instantly clutches it tight and rises to her feet with a croaking laugh of satisfaction. "Bless ye, hark ye, dear gentleman, what's your christened name?" Edwin, she repeats, trailing off into a drowsy repetition of the word, and then asks suddenly, "Is the short of that name Eddie?" "It is sometimes called so," he replies, with the color starting to his face. "Don't sweethearts call it so?" she asks, pondering. "How should I know? Haven't you a sweetheart, upon your soul?" "None." She is moving away, with another "Bless ye, and thank ye, dearie," when he adds, "You were to tell me something, you may as well do so." So I was. "Well, then, whisper, you be thankful that your name ain't Ned." He looks at her quite steadily as he asks, "Why?" "Because it's a bad name to have just now." "How a bad name?" "A threatened name. A dangerous name. The proverb says that threatened men live long," he tells her, lightly. "Then Ned, so threatened is he, wherever he may be while I'm talking to you, dearie, should live to all eternity," replies the woman. She has leaned forward to say it in his ear, with her forefinger shaking before his eyes, and now huddles herself together, and with another "Bless ye, and thank ye," goes away in the direction of the traveler's lodging house. This is not an inspiriting close to a dull day. Alone, in a sequestered place, surrounded by vestiges of old time and decay, it rather has a tendency to call a shudder into being. He makes for the better lighted streets, and resolves as he walks on to say nothing of this tonight, but to mention it to Jack, who alone calls him Ned, as an odd coincidence, to tomorrow, of course only as a coincidence, and not as anything better worth remembering. Still, it holds to him, as many things much better worth remembering never did. He has another mile or so to linger out before the dinner hour, and when he walks over the bridge and by the river, the woman's words are in the rising wind, in the angry sky, in the troubled water, in the flickering lights. There is some solemn echo of them evening in the cathedral chime, which strikes a sudden surprise to his heart as he turns in under the archway of the gatehouse. And so he goes up the postern stair. John Jasper passes a more agreeable and cheerful day than either of his guests. Having no music lessons to give in the holiday season, his time is his own, but for the cathedral services, he is early among the shopkeepers, ordering little table luxuries that his nephew likes. His nephew will not be with him long, he tells his provision dealers, and so must be petted and made much of. While out on his hospitable preparations, he looks in on Mr. Sapsea and mentions that dear Ned and that inflammable young spark of Mr. Crisparkles are to dine at the gatehouse today and make up their difference. Mr. Sapsea is by no means friendly towards the inflammable young spark. He says that his complexion is un-English. And when Mr. Sapsea has once declared anything to be un-English, he considers that thing everlastingly sunk in the bottomless pit. John Jasper is truly sorry to hear Mr. Sapsea speak thus, for he knows right well that Mr. Sapsea never speaks without a meaning, and that he has a subtle trick of being right. Mr. Sapsea, by a very remarkable coincidence, is of exactly that opinion. Mr. Jasper is in beautiful voice this day. In the pathetic supplication to have his heart inclined to keep this law, he quite astonishes his fellows by his melodious power. He has never sung difficult music with such skill and harmony as in this day's anthem. His nervous temperament is occasionally prone to take difficult music a little too quickly. Today, his time is perfect. These results are probably attained through a grand composure of the spirits. The mere mechanism of his throat is a little tender, for he wears, both with his singing robe and with his ordinary dress, a large black scarf of strong close-woven silk, slung loosely round his neck. But his composure is so noticeable that Mr. Crisparkle speaks of it as they come out from vespers. I must thank you, Jasper, for the pleasure with which I have heard you today. Beautiful, delightful, you could not have so outdone yourself, I hope, without being wonderfully well. I am wonderfully well. Nothing unequal, says the minor canon, with a smooth motion of his hand, nothing unsteady, nothing forced, nothing avoided, all thoroughly done in a masterly manner, with perfect self-command. Thank you. I hope so, if it is not too much to say. One would think, Jasper, you had been trying a new medicine for that occasional indisposition of yours. No, really, that's well observed, for I have. Then stick to it, my good fellow, says Mr. Crisparkle, clapping him on the shoulder with friendly encouragement. Stick to it. I will. I congratulate you, Mr. Crisparkle pursues as they come out of the cathedral, on all accounts. Thank you again. I will walk round to the corner with you, if you don't object. I have plenty of time before my company come, and I want to say a word to you, which I think you will not be displeased to hear. What is it? Well, we were speaking, the other evening, of my black humors. Mr. Crisparkle's face falls, and he shakes his head deploringly. I said, you know, that I should make you an antidote to those black humors, and you said you hoped I would consign them to the flames. And I still hope so, Jasper, with the best reason in the world. I mean to burn this year's diary at the year's end, because you, Mr. Crisparkle brightens greatly as he thus begins. You anticipate me, because I feel that I have been out of sorts, gloomy, bilious, brain-oppressed, whatever it may be. You said I had been exaggerative. So I have. Mr. Crisparkle's brightened face brightens still more. I couldn't see it then, because I was out of sorts, but I am in a healthier state now, and I acknowledge it with genuine pleasure. I made a great deal of a very little, that's the fact. It does me good, cries Mr. Crisparkle, to hear you say it. A man leading a monotonous life, Jasper proceeds, and getting his nerves, or his stomach, out of order, dwells upon an idea until it loses its proportions. That was my case with the idea in question, so I shall burn the evidence of my case, when the book is full, and begin the next volume with a clearer vision. This is better, says Mr. Crisparkle, stopping at the steps of his own door to shake hands, than I could have hoped. Why, naturally, returns Jasper. You had but little reason to hope that I should become more like yourself. You are always training yourself to be, mind and body, as clear as crystal, and you always are, and never change, while I am a muddy, solitary, moping weed. However, I have got over that mope. Shall I wait, while you ask if Mr. Neville has left for my place? If not, he and I may walk round together. I think, says Mr. Crisparkle, opening the entrance door with his key, that he left some time ago. At least I know he left, and I think he has not come back. But I'll inquire. You won't come in? My company wait, said Jasper with a smile. The minor canon disappears, and in a few moments returns. As he thought, Mr. Neville has not come back. Truly, as he remembers now, Mr. Neville said he would probably go straight to the gatehouse. Bad manners in a host, says Jasper. My company will be there before me. What will you bet that I don't find my company embracing? I will bet, where I would, if ever I did bet, returns Mr. Crisparkle, that your company will have a gay entertainer this evening. Jasper nods, and laughs good night. He retraces his steps to the cathedral door, and turns down past it to the gatehouse. He sings in a low voice and with delicate expression as he walks along. It still seems as if a false note were not within his power tonight, and as if nothing could hurry or retard him. Arriving thus under the arched entrance of his dwelling, he pauses for an instant in the shelter to pull off that great black scarf and bang it in a loop upon his arm. For that brief time his face is knitted and stern, but it immediately clears as he resumes his singing and his way. And so he goes up the postern stair. The red light burns steadily all the evening in the lighthouse on the margin of the tide of busy life. Softened sounds and hum of traffic pass it and flow on irregularly into the lonely precincts, but very little else goes by, save violent rushes of wind. It comes on to blow a boisterous gale. The precincts are never particularly well lighted, but the strong blasts of wind blowing out many of the lamps, in some instances shattering the frames too, and bringing the glass rattling to the ground, they are unusually dark tonight. The darkness is augmented and confused by flying dust from the earth, dry twigs from the trees, and great ragged fragments from the rooks' nests up in the tower. The trees themselves so toss and creak, as this tangible part of the darkness madly whirls about, that they seem in peril of being torn out of the earth, while ever and again a crack and a rushing fall denote that some large branch has yielded to the storm. Not such power of wind has blown for many a winter night. Chimneys topple in the streets, and people hold to posts and corners and to one another to keep themselves upon their feet. The violent rushes abate not, but increase in frequency and fury until at midnight, when the streets are empty, the storm goes thundering along them, rattling at all the latches and tearing at all the shutters, as if warning the people to get up and fly with it rather than have the roofs brought down upon their brains. Still, the red light burns steadily. Nothing is steady but the red light. All through the night the wind blows and abates not. But early in the morning, when there is barely enough light in the east to dim the stars, it begins to lull. From that time, with occasional wild charges, like a wounded monster dying, it drops and sinks, and at full daylight it is dead. It is then seen that the hands of the cathedral clock are torn off, that lead from the roof has been stripped away, rolled up, and blown into the close, and that some stones have been displaced upon the summit of the great tower. Christmas morning though it be, it is necessary to send up workmen to ascertain the extent of the damage done. These, led by Durdles, go aloft, while Mr. Tope and a crowd of early idlers gathered down in Minor Canon Corner, shading their eyes and watching for their appearance up there. This cluster is suddenly broken and put aside by the hands of Mr. Jasper. All the gazing eyes are brought down to the earth by his loudly inquiring of Mr. Crisparkle at an open window, "Where is my nephew? He has not been here. Is he not with you?" "No, he went down to the river last night with Mr. Neville to look at the storm and has not been back." "Call Mr. Neville. He left this morning early. Left this morning early. Let me in. Let me in." There is no more looking up at the tower now. All the assembled eyes are turned on Mr.